Hello and welcome. You're watching SABC News, Channel 404. I'm Tsepiso Makwetla.
And I'm Criselda Lewis. It's exactly 9 p.m. and that means most of the polling stations around the country should be closed by now. And that's, of course, if they don't have people queuing to vote.
So the IEC says voting has gone largely well around the country, except in areas where polls opened late, mostly in the Eastern Cape, KwaZulu-Natal. The IEC is saying 10% of the 22,924 voting stations were not open by 7 a.m. starting time.
That's right, Tsepiso, and by 11:30 a.m., 17 voting stations remained unopened. 14 of these were on the southern coast of KwaZulu-Natal. Inclement weather was reported in parts of the country, including parts of the Western Cape, the Eastern Cape, Northern Cape and the Free State as well.
So protest action also seeing protesters dig trenches outside voting stations, preventing staff from gaining access. Holpan in the Northern Cape was one of the battlegrounds for protesters and police as well.
Now we have a rolling coverage. Of course, we continue with that rolling coverage across the country. Our reporters on the ground with all the details. Let's find out more from them.
Okay, so let's start with the biggest hotspots area. That's KwaZulu-Natal. Protest action leading many polling stations to open late. There were also 6 arrests. The IEC describing the province as the worst performing, saying that of the 17 voting stations countrywide that hadn't opened by midday, 14 were indeed in KwaZulu-Natal. By 5 p.m. today, 5 voting stations still remain closed. Our reporter Ayanda Mhlongo is at the IEC Provincial Rock Centre in Durban. She joins us now.
It's a very good evening to you and good evening to our viewers. Yes, certainly quite a busy day here in KwaZulu-Natal, as you're saying there. Morning starting off with disruptions in various parts of the province. And although the time has come, the voting stations are now closed. But because of those delays that were experienced in a number of the voting stations, the IEC has said that it will continue to allow those people who are still in the queue to be able to cast their ballots. We're still picking up that as late as this evening in one area, in the area of Ukahlamba in the KwaZulu-Natal Midlands, 4 voting stations right until the cut-off time. Local community there had refused to vote. But to get a wrap of today from the IEC, we're now joined by Mr. Mawetu Mozore. Just to give us a wrap up, Mr. Mozore, thanks very much for your time. You had your hands full this morning as the IEC, of course, managing to catch up throughout the day. Give us a picture. It's 9 o'clock now. What is the latest?
Well, as the province, we've done fairly well in terms of the larger areas of the province. 4,800 odd voting stations operating perfectly and correctly. Certainly difficulties in eThekwini with the start, with community protest, as well as Bergville and areas of Umdoni in the south coast. And we were able, working with the police service, to find solutions and re-establish those voting stations. And we're operating, but we've continued to face difficulties in Bergville as well as in Umdoni. In eThekwini, we had a very slow start, and we closing now with a number of voters in the queues. So we expect that voting will continue for another 2 to 3 hours in some of the voting stations, given the numbers of people who are at the queue at the moment.
A very volatile area has been Ukahlamba throughout the morning. We understand that people in one particular ward, Ward 15, have decided up until 9 p.m., the closing time, not to vote. Any update on the situation there?
In that area, we did open voting stations very late in the day, about 4 p.m., and we have not seen with voters there until now, and obviously we have to consider matters like those, whether we will allow any further amount of time in those areas, or this is what we call the end of the opportunity to vote in those areas. But certainly we've had difficulties and no community participation in those areas. But in the rest of the areas, we seem to have had a very good voter turnout, and we are quite satisfied with that.
All right, we're going to leave it there for now, Mr. Mazrui. Thank you very much for your time. Of course, we will be live throughout the night, giving you those latest updates. Importantly now, while the focus has been out in the voting stations, we are now in the ROC, where a lot of the political parties are now coming forward here. Importantly now, as the results would be coming in possibly in the early hours of this morning, let's just bring in the political parties now. I'm joined by Mtumseni Ntuli, the Secretary of the ANC in KwaZulu-Natal. Mr. Ntuli, thank you so much for your time. We've just heard from the IEC. Unfortunate disruptions led to the late start of voting in certain areas. In one particular area where the ANC has quite a strong footprint, Ukhahlamba, people there are saying that they were not going to vote. Just give us from the ANC, what is the situation? What else have you picked up?
Well, most definitely. Thank you very much, Ayanda. Of course, we were informed that in Ward 15 in Bergville, Ukhahlamba local municipality, the voters could not exercise their democratic right there because of the public protest. People were not happy about this or that. But of course, there are a few other areas, instances where the IEC could not open on time. We were quite comfortable as the day goes by in terms of the progress that was made to ensure that more voters were able to be processed and we had an opportunity to exercise their democratic right. Of course, there are some areas where there were delays because of lights in the afternoon, but at this stage we do not have any confirmed VD that could not conclude on his business because of light. All we know that there were some delays, but delays were being attended to when the IEC and those who were working in the areas were improvising to ensure that voters have a possibility to vote.
All right, I'm trying to bring in as many of the parties. Thank you very much, Mr. Ntuli. We will possibly be chatting with the ANC in the early hours of the morning as those results come through. I know you'll be keenly following and monitoring what will be happening here. Let's now just quickly bring in the African Transformation Movement, Mr. Sibusiso Mncwabe, the new kid on the block. Just take us through your around the situation today. How did it go from the AFM's point of view?
Well, our view is that so far things are going well, except those few challenges that our party agent have identified, like the issues of insufficient ballot papers. There are some areas where the voters will have to wait more than 2 or 3 hours for new voters or maybe second batch of voters roll to be delivered. But number two, also there is this issue of a VC form, where if you are not voting on your area where you registered, you must complete that form. There's been some challenges that in most areas now, especially in the afternoon, those forms are finished. We're waiting for the new ones. But however, apart from that, we are convinced that elections are still going fine. As far as we are concerned, there is no pockets of violence. There are some areas where we have noted protests, but that didn't stop people going out and vote. And we are very positive that we'll get a very nice outcome as a new party in the bloc.
All right.
All right.
Mr. Mncwabe, thank you so much for your time. Sibusiso Mncwabe there, of course, representing the African Transformation Movement. We're going to be out here to piece, of course, throughout the night. As I said, more importantly, now all eyes are going to be on the operations center. The political parties have all arrived, and they'll be closely monitoring these results as they come through. Of course, we'll be keeping an eye on what is happening at the voting stations. We're counting will be continuing before the results are fed through here to this center. Let's leave it there for now, Tipiso, and take things back to you.
Thanks a lot for that, Ayanda. Very important and strategic province, and as I said, quite a number of problems coming out of there. Let's find out what's happening now in the Eastern Cape, Griselda.
Thank you very much, Tsepiso. Now, voting proceeded relatively smoothly in the Eastern Cape today, apart from a few disruptions at Ntabankulu in the Alfred Nzo district. Protests prevented a polling station from opening, and 3 others were disrupted at Elliottdale in the Amatole district. For the latest now, we cross to our reporter Zimkita Macingwana, who is in Mthatha. Zimkita, very good evening to you. It seems that polling stations have officially closed where you are, but there were some concerns about 2 hours ago from tents that had blown away in Southernhood and Solo as well. Talk us through that.
Well, it's after 9 o'clock and all South African voting stations that started opening after 7 this morning should be officially closed, like the one that's behind us, where we're coming to you live from KSD Hall, where more than 4,000 people were registered to vote here. The day has come to an end and the doors are closed. And as the doors were closing at this voting station, not far from where we are at Owen Street, the Home Affairs offices were also closing their doors. As we know that the Home Affairs offices extended their working hours today. They also opened their doors at 7 o'clock. And they also closed at 9 o'clock, giving a chance to all the people who needed to collect their identity documents for them to be able to come and cast their ballots. Well, now we've got the last person who was able to make it through this voting station, and he's excited because he's the last person, but you have come to this station more than 3 times already. Just tell us about the process of you trying to come here and finally coming before 9 o'clock to cast your ballot.
Yes, I came earlier a bit, but there was a problem of electricity. Everybody was running to the hall just to change the venue, but I decided to just go away. But I'm very, excited to be the last one to cast my vote just to check. Just to give my voice of what is supposed to be done by our government.
So you sealed it off. You sealed it off for the people who were voting here.
Yes, I just wanted to give the whoever is going to win a chance to accelerate what we call it the service delivery in terms of especially in our rural part of our.
What are some of those services that you want to be sped up?
If I can put two of them, electricity, especially water, roads. Yeah, we are getting there, but electricity and water is the best, and the toilets.
Okay, thank you so much for your time. Well, voting has come to an end here. We can say in the rural part of the Eastern Cape, voting was peaceful, except for isolated incidents. And we know that in Ntabankulu, one voting station did not open at all today due to the community demanding that services must be brought to that area. So they did not participate in voting today. Also at Elliottdale, there were disruptions in 3 voting stations where communities were protesting, saying that they're also demanding roads, water, and other important infrastructure like bridges to various schools in that area. They are saying that they are not going to vote because they have been voting for the past 25 years and nothing has been done. So now the process has come to an end. Inside this voting station, we have the police officers who were here the whole day, the IEC officials and the presiding officers who are now going to seal those ballot boxes and then escort, the police are going to escort the IEC officials to where the voting is going to start. And for this area, the voting is going to be at the Mthatha Stadium. So we are going to monitor now. Now we're not talking about people coming to voting stations, casting their ballots. Now the focus now now is the counting of those votes, and everyone now is putting their eyes on those numbers. So we will be monitoring those numbers as they start to trickle in and bring you those updates tomorrow morning. We have been crisscrossing the rural parts of the Eastern Cape from as early as 7 o'clock this morning. We're in Port St. John's, and even in those areas it was reported that it was peaceful, and people went to their polling station as early as 8 o'clock to cast their ballots. And now we're expecting things to be shut down, and then those ballot papers and boxes to be collected to those areas for counting.
Zimkita Makungwane there, crossing to us live from Mthatha. Of course, you'd recall that particular area was a hive of protest activity in the run-up to this election. Of course, we'll all be keeping track of the numbers that will slowly start trickling in once the counting, of course, gets underway, which is expected, of course, to be getting underway any minute now. Tsepiso.
Indeed, and at the Results Operations Center, the nerve center where the real deal gets underway, is where Stephen, my colleague, is. And we'll tell you a little bit more about that shortly. But we also know that the IC has announced that it'll only hold its next press briefing, that is tomorrow at 11. So to the Northwest Province now. Marikana, once a no-go area, was a hive of activity today as people turned out in their numbers. Community members seemed happy to be exercising their vote, but called for a change after the elections. Some were disappointed about having had to wait. The longest queues in the province were reported at voting stations at the Brit Hoër School and Thornhen Primary School. Uleboheng Khosientswe is in Marikana. Uleboheng, let's first start with which polling station you are at the moment, and has it closed? Right. No. All right, let's see if we can reconnect with my colleague Uleboheng, who seemed to be having some difficulty in terms of sounds. But of course, we are across the country here on SABC. Our reporters on the ground giving us the latest. And you know that at 9 p.m, that's when most polling stations were due to close, except for those that either didn't open, and of course, or were delayed. And IEC has promised that as long as people are in the queues, they certainly will allow people to vote. So we'll be back with more rolling coverage here on SABC News Channel. Don't go away.
Is the SABC News Channel, independent and impartial.
When news happens around the world, we will bring it to you. We will keep you informed. Each day, every day, our news team digs deeper, getting all the facts to provide comprehensive reports to what's important to you. We cover all corners of the globe. SABC News, independent and impartial.
In a UN report, scientists say climate change is getting worse.
1/3 of our food sources for the population come out of the ocean.
We spoke to people who have been directly affected.
We have lost a lot of cattle. Gemsbokvlakte, Tosca gebied and Jakkalskop. Everywhere you will see there's animals dying.
I've lost 2 of my cattle this January.
Africa's demand for clean drinking water is rising.
Drinking water is a top priority.
The next day when the water comes back, it's dirty.
I have implemented a level 5 water restriction, effective immediately.
Environmentalists seek solution to preserve the planet.
This is a Cape Kirpa, which is also one of the endemic species that is only found within the Western Cape, so it occurs nowhere else in the world except in our water systems.
In a UN report, scientists say climate change is getting worse.
1/3 of our food sources for the population come out of the ocean.
We spoke to people who have been directly affected.
We have lost a lot of cattle. Gemsbokvlakte, Tosca gebied and Jakkalskop. Everywhere you will see there's animals dying.
I've lost 2 of my cattle this January.
Africa's demand for clean drinking water is rising.
Drinking water is a top priority.
The next day when the water comes back, it's dirty.
We have implemented a level 5 water restriction, effective immediately.
Environmentalists seek solution to preserve the planet.
This is a Cape Kirpa, which is also one of the endemic species that is only found within the Western Cape, so it occurs nowhere else in the world except in our water systems.
Welcome back. You're watching SABC News Channel, blow-by-blow account of elections 2019 here in South Africa. Let's take you to the Northwest Province now, where Marikana, once a no-go area, was a hive of activity today as people turned out in their numbers. Community members seemed happy to exercise their right to vote, but called for change after the election. Some say they're disappointed about having had to wait. The longest queues in the province there were reported at voting stations in Brits Hoër School and Thornhill Primary School. Oleboheng Khosilenzwe is there in Marikana. Oleboheng, a very good evening to you. Please tell us which voting station you're at and has it closed?
Good evening, Tepiso. Well, I'm battling to hear you there, but I can tell you that it's been very, very calm in Marikana throughout the day. We visited quite a lot of voting stations, and all we have seen is a spirit of unity, a spirit of peace, and quite amazingly, a spirit of excitement despite the living conditions of the people in Marikana. I'm right now at Marikana Primary School, where the voting station, the gate has closed, but there's a lot of people around that are yet to cast their vote, and some who have already cast their vote, but are excited to speak to us. So I'm going to be speaking to just a few of them. Hello, Mama. Wena ufitlile lata ufitlile na kumang mo voting station o ifila yang ka gore o kgonne go vote?
Ndifike ngaxesha kusengexesha ndifike ndavota nje kakuhle kabekho ngxabangxaba sivotile ngokwanele sivota lo rhulumente umtsha naxa sizile nje apha sisenezikhalazo siyakhalaza ngoba apha emarikana amanzi asinawo size singahlambanga asihlamba nyaka esithathu ngamanzi asinawo sinusulwa zisuriji senze kodwa sivota unyaka siyavota lo ngxesha asiboni utshintsho sicela utshintsho.
So she's just explaining that she has voted, even though they keep voting, they don't see any changes, but they're certainly hoping that their mark this year will make some form of difference. Also, ka wena mpolelle gore o solofela go bona eng morago ga ditlhopho tsa gompieno?
Ntho re batlang go e bona Marikana mona na go re metsi re be le ona le di shuri se di tletse hohle mona re tsamaya hohle mo ileng hore di potholes di koloi hona mo di tsamayang teng ho go change ho be di diphetho after di vote ho be di diphetho ene ga di lebelletse.
She's also looking for changes. She's looking for water. She's looking for proper sanitation. She's looking for roads after she's cast her vote today. So, Obutwaka, wena maikutlo ga go ke eng ka ditlhopho tsa gompieno go tsamaile yang a gone go le kagiso a gone go le ditlhakatlhakano ntlhalosetse fela gore go tlhopha ga ga gone go le yang gompieno?
I'm only glad that it was peaceful, and we are only expecting for a better living conditions. As the sister explained that there are potholes, we are complaining about potholes, and also we are lacking our water. Thank you.
So, Tsepiso, even though they have those grievances to raise, they are so excited that they have exercised their democratic right to vote. Scores of people stand behind me. Scores of them have voted. Some are yet to vote. The queue is still quite long. If I can ask to just pan to the right-hand side to show you that activity still goes on at this voting station, despite the fact that the sun has set. And the feeling really here is very, very jovial, and the feeling of peace. And the people of Marikana are finally saying that despite what happened in 2012, they have come together, they are reconciling, and they're really hoping for change after these elections. For now, it's back to you in the studio, Tsepiso.
Thank you very much, Oleboheng. Khosilenzwe, our colleague in Marikana, will be taking you all across the country to get the latest. And as I mentioned earlier on, that my colleague Stephen Grootes is at the ROC, the Results Operations Center. They've been having briefings almost on a 2-hourly basis on the latest, as you would know, some of the big issues coming out of the vote today, that of the indelible ink, some reporting that it comes off easily. The IEC is saying that it does note those reports, and reports of people either attempting to vote or those who've claimed that they've voted twice. You'll see a lot of that in social media, and we'll hear a little bit more about that from our social media team. But they're also saying that people who have done this are in danger of being imprisoned, as in if they're charged and found guilty, they will face the full might of the law. There's also been reports of intimidation of electoral officers. IEC speaking out very strongly against that as well, saying that anybody found guilty of that, you would know that there were reports of that in KwaZulu-Natal, in Kimberley, and in other parts of the country. We'll bring you more rolling coverage of that. I would also like to hear from you. Please do send us your videos of how your voting experience was, a picture of your finger, and just generally, do you have hope about these elections? Of course, most of us here, have taken time to cast our vote, hoping that you were able to, especially if you're a worker. Do tell us, were you allowed by your employers to go and vote? Because there have been reports of some workers being prevented from doing that. So please send in those reports. But now let's find out what's happening, tracking the pulse of the polls through the online media, social media. Let's find out now from my colleagues. Shante?
Indeed, so tracking the pulse of the polls through the online heartbeat of social media every hour here on the Full View this week. That's what social media expert Yavi Badarai, managing director of Black Box Theory, and I will be doing throughout the course of this election week. Well, national voting got under full swing this morning and picked up very, very quickly, Yavi, with that hashtag, after I vote, I expect. And those are some of the tweets that we'll be having a look at this evening.
So that started off this morning at 5 a.m. So people were probably driving to voting stations, doing whatever is necessary to be able to start voting. And that hashtag started because I was up. So I was tracking it from 5 a.m. Interesting. So two sides to it. The first side to it was exceptionally funny. I mean, I was standing in a voting queue much later in the day, kind of having a good laugh at it, because you can imagine what people wanted to be able to say. But then there was the serious side. So generally, the thread of that particular hashtag showed a couple of key themes. And the key themes for that particular hashtag, from a serious perspective, was very much around well, let's look at the funny ones, right?
So this one coming in with that hashtag, after voting, I expect about Tubamina, about to make it and fix the economy so that we can all chow. These are the lighter-hearted ones that we saw coming through. Yeah,
there are a few light-hearted ones.
Some also got quite serious, where people really wanted to show what they are expecting with regards to, you know, jobs, whether it came to unemployment, whether it came to education, specifically from a lot of young people with the social presence.
So you talk about that, and a lot of the graduate aspect came through in terms of where, I mean, this is RDP housing, and look, he's making a joke, but the RDP housing thing comes through very strongly. The land issue came through very, very strongly in relation to this particular tweet. But there was also, so education, crime. Dealing with crime came through very, very clearly.
This one's related to education. Let's read this. People who graduated under a certain qualification to lead in the department related to it were tired of people who did sports being ministers of finance. Ooh, that's some shade coming in from Emmanuel. So these are just some of the tweets that we have been seeing. And of course, this hashtag picked up relatively early in the morning.
Very early, as I was saying, it picked up at about 5 this morning, and it got very strong at about 12 o'clock today, because remember, the biggest part of, or the masses start very, very early, the moment the voting stations open. So people were standing there kind of going, well, what do I expect after I make my mark? The other aspect of it is, psychologically, is that we look at it in terms of for the past few weeks, all we have seen is vote for and fill in the blanks in terms of the political parties. This was a case of putting it on its head and saying, this is what I expect from you now.
Yeah. Well, the president of South Africa, Cyril Ramaphosa, took to social media today. In fact, he took to Instagram. He went on Instagram Live with SA personality Bonang Matheba to urge people to vote. Let's have a look at that video. All right, we are going to wait for that video to come up. So that was also quite funny, actually, seeing the president engage with Bonang. I believe at the time she was in the car when they did that live media crossing. And we spoke about this yesterday, saying that, you know, political parties hadn't necessarily used the different aspects of social media. And could this possibly have been something that had been done before?
And that becomes the key question, is that why didn't they do more of this earlier?
Yeah,
let's
have a look
at the video. Is it up?
Yeah, Mr. Prezi, I'm like very woke. So I'm telling all my fans to vote and go out and wake up. That's all.
Okay. Okay. Go vote. Thank you so much. Wonderful.
Say hi to everyone, Mr. President, before you go. Say hi.
Bye-bye. Very excited.
Bye.
Very excited.
Hey, everybody. Okay, Limoni, Mr. President, Mr. Prezi, y'all better do your feesies. Oh, the entire Republic, President of the Republic of South Africa.
All right, there you have it from Bonang and Mr. Prezi urging voters to vote this morning. I'm going to cross it over to the other side of the desk with Tepiso as well as Crisalda.
Well, I'm jealous. I'm jealous. I didn't get a call from anybody telling me to go out and vote. And he didn't only speak to Bonang. He spoke to AKA. He spoke to DJ Tira. And they were all so surprised. And the interaction was quite, as they would say, lit.
You know what is interesting? A friend of mine in Uganda actually tweeted that, you know, that is the epitome of being an influencer.
Yeah.
If a president calls you on the day of election to say, go out and vote, you know, you make the cut.
Well, that's right. Let's continue now with all the other news, of course, election-related. After weeks of persuasive talk, political party leaders made their remark today. ANC President Cyril Ramaphosa and DA leader Mmusi Maimane both voted in Soweto.
Ramaphosa returned to his roots and voted at Itekani primary in Shawelo. He urged all South Africans to exercise their democratic right to vote.
The normally quiet township of Chiawelo in Soweto, bustling with activity, throngs of people jostled to catch a glimpse of their son. Ramaphosa was born here in 1952. He returned home to make his cross, evoking memories of 1994.
This is a vote that reminds us of 1994, because in 1994, our people were just as excited as this, because they were heralding a new period, a new future for our country. And today, this is what I am also picking up. Our people are really excited about what lies tomorrow.
Confident of victory, the president said he was ready to hit the ground running.
People were all standing here. I'm going to climb their shoulders and stand on their shoulders so that I can see far ahead, so that I can do exactly what they would like us to do. This, for me, is fantastic, and thank you very much.
He wanted those who were protesting to voice their concerns through the ballot.
It is only when you vote that your voice can be heard. It is only when you vote that those issues that you are concerned about can actually be addressed.
The results will be officially announced on Saturday. It's been a grueling 3 months where politicians have been crisscrossing the country, stating their case to the electorate. It's now up to these people to decide who will be their next government for the next 5 years. Mzwande Lembeje, SABC News, Soweto, Johannesburg.
Optimistic about his party's chances provincially and nationally, the DA leader Mmusi Maimane was among the first to cast his vote this morning in Dobsonville, Soweto.
Gauteng remains a hotly contested province with the highest number of registered voters, sitting at 6.4 million.
I'm feeling good. It's a historic moment.
And you're confident that you're going to win?
Yeah, we're going to do well.
The leader of the Democrats believes Gauteng is his for the taking.
This is the country I want to build, and therefore I'm confident about Gauteng. The numbers are turning out, and I'm calling on the people of South Africa. Fear says to us, let's stick with what we know. Hope says, let's bring change. Let's bring a new chapter in this province, in this economic hub, so one day we can deliver jobs. It's the confidence I'm calling for South Africans. Let's not be fearful now. Our country is asking for more of us, and therefore I'm calling upon all of them to turn out to vote today and bring change.
My mind is of the view that the country's democracy has veered off course.
I say people today, they must wear whatever shirt they so choose to. This vote is about competence. This vote is about saying, let Musi Maimane run this country so that we can take it forward, so that we can make sure we clean out this country. So the last 25 years had a great start, a dreadful finish. Because frankly, we've missed an opportunity to address our historical injustices. Frankly, we've missed an opportunity to make sure that those who are on the outside are brought in. Therefore, I'm asking to say this election is about a competence. It's about building a government for all, black, white, Christian, Muslim, all South Africans. This is about that.
Among those voting with Maimane was 69-year-old Nora Mosobe, first in line to cast a ballot.
I am very happy to be voting. I came here early, wanting to be the first in line.
Voting stations remain open until 9 p.m. Natasha Piri, SABC News, Johannesburg.
And Economic Freedom Fighters leader Julius Malema cast his vote at Mponegele Primary School in Seshego in Polokwane, Limpopo.
Malema arrived at the school, which he attended with his wife Mantwa. At previous elections, he had also always been accompanied by his grandmother, who died on Saturday.
EFF leader Julius Malema has cast his ballots at Mponegele Primary School. He says it's a privilege to cast a ballot as many people have lost their lives for a democratic South Africa. Malema says his grandmother would have accompanied him to cast his vote.
She would have wanted to be here, but you know, we don't decide. God decides what happens. It is always very exciting for me to be accompanied by my grandmother when conducting important things. And voting as one of those important things will ordinarily be together when we come to vote.
Community members in Seshego have expressed their feelings following the vote.
Excited, and I pray that let the great party win, and then we hope for the best. And I feel so much that I feel like that I've made a difference in our country.
Oh, okay. I feel very happy and free. I feel at peace now because everything that I've been hoping for, I think is gonna happen.
Seshego is an EFF stronghold, but the party's leader says they will accept any outcome. Philip van der Walt, SABC News, Seshego, Polokwane.
And IFP leader Nkosi Mangosuthu Buthelezi says he has lodged a complaint with the IEC about allegations of vote manipulation.
Buthelezi says his party received information about irregular incidents at some voting stations, but he wouldn't say exactly where.
He made the claims in Ulundi in northern KwaZulu-Natal after casting his vote.
A joyous crowd welcoming the IFP leader. Nkosi Mangosuthu Buthelezi cast his vote here for the 10th time in a democratic South Africa. He said he was confident about his party's prospects of growth, but raised concerns about vote manipulation.
I've reported all the information we have to the chairperson last night, Mr. Glenn Mashinini, and he has committed to raise it with the Chief Electoral Officer, Mr. Sai Mamawolo. I felt, however, that voters needed to be alerted so that everyone visiting the voting station today will be vigilant and watch for any evidence of fraud.
Buthelezi, who has been at the helm of the IFP since its formation in 1975, said he will still be a member of parliament in the 6th Democratic administration. This comes as his party confirmed that Buthelezi will be vacating his position after the party's elective conference.
So, of course, all eyes will be on the Results Operations Centre in Pretoria. Our colleague Stephen Curtis is there. Stephen, a very good evening to you. I know it might be a bit too soon, but are we expecting the leaderboard to start flashing anytime soon?
Well, Griselda, good evening. Yes, we are. And in fact, if you look at the Electoral Commission's app, the IEC app, for example, and it'll have the 3 biggest parties, and it says ASC, ATM, and AASD. Mr. Money, so I wouldn't get too excited for the moment. What they're actually doing is that's alphabetical order because none of the votes have yet been counted. Let me talk you through some of the resources that are available for you. And I'm just going to stand up and you'll see the screen that I'm looking at. It's the world's biggest TV. It's on loan for the moment. But for example, you can see this page here, and what that really shows you some of the resources available from the SABC. You go to sabcnews.com and you'll be able to access those resources. You can compare the results with what happened last time around. You can compare as well with what happened in 2016. Now check this out. This is very interesting. This is the Electoral Commission website. So the easiest thing to do is search IEC. You'll find it very quickly. Go to the results section. And what's interesting about this is that while there is an app that'll work both on Android and iOS, and on Android and on Apple devices, what you're able to do on the website is actually access a lot more information. So it's a bit more detailed if you're sort of, politics nerd like me. You'll be able to go and look at that. And you can see here again that, the votes have not yet been counted. They've got the registered population and turnout. We'll talk about turnout in a moment. I'm looking forward to this conversation. The parties, the sort of big parties, you scroll it up and you'll find, for example, there's the ANC, you've got the Democratic Alliance, the EFF there as well, and then you've got all of the other political parties as part of that. And then I want to show you some of the information that's actually quite interesting because it tells us certain things about our country and about turnout in this election. Now, there are a couple of ways to judge turnout. As I understand the way the Electoral Commission does it, it takes the number of registered voters and the number of people who vote. So if there are 100 registered voters and 98 people vote of those registered voters, turnout is 98%, according to that way of looking at it. But perhaps a more accurate way of looking at it, and this is a bit contested, is that you can say who is eligible to vote. In other words, who is South African and over the age of 18, and they have the right to vote. You take that number, you take it from the Census, Statistics South Africa, you look at the registration number, and then you look at the number of people who've actually voted, and you perhaps get a more accurate figure. Now let me show you this. So there is a decline in population of people who are actually voting. So there's a decline in participation in the elections that makes it quite interesting. So in all of these elections, we've seen, for example, that age groups over 40, 85% of those people seem to be voting. Young people are still unrepresented on the voters' roll. Now, there are 2 ways to look at this. Many people will look at a number like this and say, young people aren't voting because politics turns them off, or the politicians aren't speaking to them, or there's disillusionment that's setting in. You look at a youth unemployment figure of 56%, and people will look at that argument. There's another argument that says, as democracies age, people use the word mature, but as democracies get older, in other words, our democracy is 25 years old, young people stop voting unless there's a particular reason for them to vote. So in countries that have been voting for, say, 100 years, say the United States or Britain, you'll find that only about half of the people who are actually eligible to vote will actually do that. So you could say, on the one side, there's disillusionment, and on the other side, that there's actually a situation where our population and our democracy is maturing. Let's discuss that a little bit now with someone who's really studied this particular issue. And Dr. Colette Schulz-Hasenberg is a political lecturer at the University of Stellenbosch. Dr. Schulz-Hasenberg, good evening to you and thank you for your time.
Thank you.
All right, there's a big conversation tonight. I mean, all the politicians disagree. Someone can't be telling the truth. Some of them say that a big turnout helps the bigger parties, and some of them say a big turnout helps the smaller parties. In your view, is there an answer to this question?
Well, turnout's critical in any election, but particularly in a proportional representation system like we have. So what basically happens is if a party is able to get its support base out in relatively bigger proportions to the next party, they can essentially hold the power in that election without really gaining any additional new votes. What happened in 2016, for example, is that the ANC saw a suppressed voter turnout amongst its partisan support base, and we can debate why that was the case. But essentially, for example, a big opposition party like the Democratic Alliance was able to get voters out in much bigger proportions without necessarily earning a new vote. And we saw the DA benefit from that. But in this election, there's quite a lot of debate about whether we're going to have a low turnout or a high turnout, and there's reasons to expect either scenario.
Okay, so if we can expect either scenario, we can still argue about it afterwards. So let's look at things that depress turnout. So what would depress turnout? I mean, the obvious one would be weather, bad weather.
Bad weather. Cape Town experienced rain this morning. That could have some sort of depressing effect. But more importantly, what we've seen in South Africa in the last few years, over the last few elections actually, is a decline in people who feel close to political parties. Now, this will depress turnout because if you don't have that motivation to go out and support a particular party, in other words, you're independent or non-partisan, you tend not to be as likely to vote. Another reason to expect perhaps low turnout would be low levels of trust in political parties at the moment. And that's been an increasing phenomenon in South Africa and globally. But there are also reasons to expect a higher than usual turnout. And there are two reasons for that. Stephen, the one reason is that we've got close contested elections. Competitive elections really bring voters to the polls because voters sense that their vote actually might make a difference. And if we think about the most contested provinces right now in Gauteng and the Western Cape, we could expect higher than usual voter turnout because people understand, particularly in a PR system, this could make a difference.
One of the interesting things is that usually wherever you live, the poorer you are, the more government matters, the more you rely on government services. You'd think then that that would mean that poorer people are more likely to vote. People without resources are much, voting matters more to them.
Yeah.
Do we find that in South Africa?
To some extent, we found that to be the case in the early elections, not so much anymore. If you look at some of the data that's been done, some of the research, it seems to suggest that poorer communities have less ability to get to the polls. There's all sort of logistical issues that prevent people from traveling on the day, but also from registering. And in fact, we see some of the highest non-registration levels amongst young, poorer people here in Gauteng and elsewhere. So I think demographics and social economic backgrounds are having an impact and perhaps dampening the motivation to go out and register in the first place.
The sort of classic election that people talk about getting young people to vote is Obama's first election in 2008. And suddenly young people came in, and I think the election before had seen 50% poll. Suddenly there was a 60% poll in 2008 because Obama brought out that constituency. That talks about the importance of candidates. I mean, Julius Malema would obviously compare himself to Barack Obama.
Yep. Well, candidates are going to be crucial in this election, for sure. I mean, the one thing we do know from the data is that people are really looking closely at the top three leaders of political parties, and there are very different favorability ratings for them. And I think this one particular evaluation will matter a great deal.
All right. Dr. Colette Schultz-Hasenberg, thank you very much indeed for your time tonight here at the Results Operations Centre. I really do appreciate it. All right. A lot more to come from here over the next little while. We are expecting to hear from the Electoral Commission themselves. They've agreed to speak to us after 10 o'clock here at the Results Operations Centre in Pretoria. Back to Johannesburg now, Tsepiso and Griselda.
Well, thank you very much, Stephen. We'll be crossing back to him again to give us more details as we see that board light up in the next couple of minutes into hours. Let's move on now to chat to some of our reporters who are still on the ground. Police officers had to escort IEC officials at the Macquarie in the Free State today. IEC spokesperson Matabo Rasingane said 90 officials had to be escorted after service delivery protests caused disruptions at 12 voting stations. They eventually opened at around 10 a.m. No arrests were made and nobody was injured. SABC reporter Aphumelele Mdlalane is in Bethlehem in the Free State. Very good evening to you, Aphumelele. What's the situation where you are?
A very good evening to you, Griselda. We've seen a lot of people going to the polls, of course, braving this rainy weather. As I'm talking to you right now, it's heavily pouring here in Bethlehem, and it's been, of course, the situation here in the Eastern Free State. We managed to talk to the IEC, where they could tell us that also delayed some other voting stations when it comes to the processes of voting. They opened at least at around 10 o'clock checking the IEC voting stations here in Bethlehem at around 8, and before they could close around 9 o'clock, we could see that, and also understanding from what they were telling us that there has not been glitches whatsoever. People were streaming in. Also later on, we could see that people that couldn't make it during the day because they went to work, they managed to make to exercise their right before, of course, 9 o'clock. We also went to Kwakwa, where we know that the situation of the municipality is distressed there, talking to residents, and they were happy to say, of course, it's important for them to vote, because if they want to see a change, they should exercise their right. So far, we can say that things have been running smoothly. Earlier on, I also went to Marquardt, where we know it's our hotspot in the Free State, where protesters, they made a vow that no one would be going to the polls today to exercise their rights. They will do by all means due to, of course, their dissatisfaction on services in the area. But when we were there early hours of the morning, we could see that elderly people, surprisingly, not even youth, we could identify on the queues, but the voting processes went smoothly, but there was high visibility of police in the area. Talking to the Free State manager, Ntate Itumeleng Ndiba, also mentioned that one official from the IEC, of course, was fired following not following procedures during the voting process when it was during the time for special votes. But so far, we could see that everything has went well on our side, even though there was also another incident in Kwakwa, Criselda, where last night a tent was stolen that was meant to be a voting station, but it was replaced this morning by the IEC officials, and there were no glitches in that area. Ward 35 at Maluti Apufung, the processes of voting went very smoothly. Also in Viljoenskroon, where we could see, we also saw yesterday a hall was torched that was meant to be a voting station. People were arrested there, and they also vowed not to vote. But today, my colleague could, of course, report that voting processes are going smoothly. Police.
Well, we do apologize. We seem to have a break in transmission there, of course, with our reporter Aphumelele Mdlalane, who is live to us from Bethlehem in the Free State. She's, of course, monitoring since this morning that part of the country. But, of course, in the next few moments, we're going to take a short break. But when we come back, we're also going to welcome our SABC2 viewers.
Indeed. So we're simulcasting on both channel 404 DSTV and, of course, on SABC2. And please do keep us up to speed on what's happening where you are. And if you are still in a queue, let us know how many people are with you. And also tell us a little bit more about your voting experience. We'll be back shortly.
Hello, I'm Nana, and I want to tell you a bit about Economics Unbound. It is a live studio current affairs program that brings an understanding of the economy, how it operates, and how it is managed. The show seeks to include ordinary South Africans in purposeful and well-informed discussions about the economy.
The whole corruption and having to pay people to get businesses, it's like killing our businesses.
While providing them with enough information to make better economic and financial decisions.
And we need to start thinking of new ways of creating new structures that are relevant at the time.
Through this program, audiences can look forward to 30 minutes of deep and tough questioning on the issues of the week.
Why do you think that our economy lends itself to such collusive behavior and such concentration of monopolies in key sectors?
Reporter Sipho Stearman. Sipho, thank you very much indeed. What are they protesting about?
Well, they're talking about their living conditions, that they don't have clean drinking water, they don't have proper toilets, they don't have proper housing.
Lopang, tell us what's happening where you are.
Early this morning, one classroom was set alight at the school.
Reptiles are creeping into the classrooms like snakes.
Residents are saying that they've been failed by the Mokaga municipality.
This is what you see. People are angry. Let the municipal manager go.
SABC News is producing more than 150 election-related programs ahead of the May 8th election. If you think our content is not in line with our editorial policy, direct your complaints in writing to complaints@sabc.co.za. Complaints on election-related broadcast content should also be lodged with ICASA's Complaints and Compliance Committee by sending an email to bmashihu@icasa.org.za or call 012-568-3233.
We're explorers. We always have been, endlessly curious, always looking for answers, for new frontiers, for new stories. Because that is who we are. From script to screen, from yelling action to taking you on a journey. Radio producers, script writers, on-air presenters, news reporters, sports analysts. We spend late nights creating captivating storylines and earlier mornings keeping you informed, educated, and entertained. For us, it's not a job, it's a calling. We do this and more because you do your part. SABC TV licenses, made possible by you.
As we continue our rolling coverage here on the SABC News channel, thank you very much for staying with us. And of course, now we also welcome our viewers on SABC2. A very good evening to you.
A very good evening to you. I'm Tsepiso Makwete, and of course our colleague Stephen Groothuis is at the Results Operations Center of the IEC in Pretoria. He joins us in just a moment. But just to let you know, we are giving you rolling coverage.
Yes.
I see Twitterati still on it, over 1,000 tweets in the last hour for hashtag SA Decides 2019. So do keep them coming, keep engaging us.
All right, in just a few moments, we'll link up with Stephen Groothuis, who's, of course, at the Results Centre in Pretoria.
I need to ask you what your voting experience was like. Mine went fairly smoothly. I spent about 30 minutes in the queue. Rather nippy, but the lines were manageable. How was yours?
It was quite a fantastic experience. But, Tsepiso, before we talk about exactly what we went through, let's quickly go to Stephen Groothuis. He's at the Results Centre in Pretoria, and he'll be speaking to the IEC's Janet Love. Stephen, good evening.
Good evening, Griselda. Good evening, Tsepiso. Good evening to you on SABC2, and hello once again on the SABC News channel. Thanks for joining us. Well, I suppose you'd say post-election night. Let's find out if the election is actually formally over from the voting side. One of the people who will know is a commissioner of the Electoral Commission, Janet Love. Madam Commissioner, good evening to you, and thank you so much for your time this evening.
Good evening, Stephen, and to the listeners and watchers and viewers.
All right, so firstly, of course, voting started 7 o'clock this morning. That's 14 hours ago. 15 hours ago, in fact. Are you able to confirm that all of the polling stations are now closed? In other words, have the last people in the queues voted?
No, I think that that's not the case. We haven't got all the reports in, but we are clear that there are some areas where we've got longer queues. There are a number of reasons for that, but we are absolutely committed to ensuring that anybody who is in the queue is going to be dealt with before we close that particular station.
I imagine Twitter will tell you if there are any of those problems pretty quickly. We'll keep an eye on that as well. Okay. Counting. Now, have I got this right? The people who actually preside at the voting stations are the people doing the counting. So they've already been on the go for 15 hours.
Correct. And mind you, in addition to that, they are doing that in front of party agents, many of whom have also been awake for the same period of time. So there's a lot of coffee flowing, and I'm sure that people are recognizing that they need to be as systematic as possible, because to try and do anything like that in a hurry just makes the process longer. You'll end up doing things twice rather than doing them carefully once. So I think that's where we are.
Okay, when voting stops, does the electoral officer or the presiding officer at a polling station automatically have to start the counting, or can they maybe decide if they've got a large number of votes to count that maybe they should have a sleep first, or, you know, in conjunction with the party agents? How does that work?
No. In general, what you could have a situation where the presiding officer will say we can take a 5-minute break so that people can do whatever they need to do, because basically once the counting process starts, that place is a sealed area until the counting process has not just started but seen its way through. And so you've got a situation where you're going to have people in the room, cell phones must be off, you're then going to have people being able to check the seals on the closed ballots, on the closed ballot boxes and so on, and then taking down all the numbers, doing the reconciliation, because as you know, each voting station has been given a certain number of ballots and so on and so forth. All of those things take time, and people know that that's what they're in for. They're in for a long haul.
Okay, and I mean the key to the system, our system, is that party agents are there. They watch the whole thing.
100%. And we really value that as a contribution because it adds to the oversight. It's one of the reasons we also really have been encouraging people that where they've got problems or they've experienced any difficulty, to really try and raise it there and then at the voting station, even if they want to escalate it later, because that then gives us the possibility for any objection that comes forward and so on, for that to be really properly and carefully assessed.
All right, if I go to your website right now, which in fact I can do, it does unfortunately say that, you know, total valid votes is 0. In other words, am I right in saying that none of them have come through yet?
None of them have come through, and we wouldn't expect, even from the smaller voting stations, for things to come through for a few hours.
All right.
A couple of hours at the very least.
Got a nation on tenterhooks, 11, 12 o'clock, 1 o'clock?
I think we can start seeing some of the results coming through then, certainly from the smaller stations and the stations where things have, you know, they don't have the kind of queues and so on. But I think that we don't expect to really get any sense of anything until sometime tomorrow morning. So we're looking at a long day stroke night for many of us.
All right, I don't know who your coffee supplier is, but I hope they have plenty in stock. When we have this situation, I mean, in some countries you see that some of the smaller towns actually compete to be the first to report. Do you have that dynamic?
Well, we do have some provinces who will tell you that they can get their show on the road a lot quicker and their show finished a lot quicker, and it might have something to do with size. I'm not commenting, but yes, we do have a bit of that competition.
Okay, one of the things that's likely to happen over the next few days, and has happened in previous elections, is that political parties will come out and make predictions, and some of them will actually be quite accurate because they've got party agents on the ground.
Absolutely.
Now, how are they able to almost sort of, I'll use this, declare results before you can? Is it because they don't audit and you do?
Well, no, I think that the issue is that, first of all, we, as you know, try and give a simultaneous feed for anything that is captured into the system at the same time. So what they're often doing is just checking, that what they already got in their system is according with what is captured in an audited process. But the second thing is we deal with some of the more complicated things towards the end, where there have been recounts within a voting station before they've been happy to sign off on the results. We have to deal with objections and so on. So that's part of the reason that we have to hold back, because we can't not deal with those kinds of concerns and pronounce. We have to wait until we've dealt with everything systematically.
You don't want to be first, you want to be right.
We want to be right, absolutely,
okay.
Absolutely.
It must be a little frustrating to see opposition, to see political parties coming out and making these predictions.
Look, I think so long as political parties are clear that what they're doing is they're providing the South African public with their own estimations, their own predictions, and not attempting or giving the impression of announcing any result, we're comfortable with that, just as we know people from, that's why we provide the simultaneous feed. We want people to feel that they know what is happening, that they're monitoring what as it's happening. So there's nothing in the dark and in the corners.
Okay, there's been a lot of conversation on social media today, and some of it's moved into mainstream media, about this idea of people perhaps being able to vote twice. As I understand, what people are suggesting is that you're supposed to vote at one particular place, you're supposed to vote in one area, you go to that area and you go and check if you're able to actually vote there, and you vote there. But you're also able to vote outside your province, but only nationally, or you could actually vote at a different polling station and still have both your national and provincial ballot. And that seems to be a loophole. As it's been explained to me, what that means is that someone is supposed to check off your ID number, but in fact they don't do that. Can you just explain this problem to us?
Well, okay, so first of all, I think that we need to see there are a kind of basket of checks and balances, and the issue that you've raised has been associated with a concern that people have had about the inking of people's fingers, and the fact that there have been various things on social media, including that you used domestos and I don't know what else to remove it. And so there have been indications that people have been trying that. And if you combine that with the kind of scenario that you've been talking about, people are saying, well, that is then a vulnerability. Now, we have heard that in a general way. We've seen it on social media, and we've really urged people to come through with quite clear specifics to us, not of where it theoretically could have happened, but where something has happened. And the reason we've done that is because within our system, we do have checks and balances. So when we have what we call VEC 4 forms being filled in, we've got a way of looking at that in relation to the overall percentage of what has come in, and we can actually identify certain fault lines within our system and do the kind of checks which we in any case do. But we are saying to political parties, to individuals, where there are problems, please raise those specifically, because we take everything quite seriously specifically. It's very difficult, not that we're saying everything on social media is problematic, but it's difficult for us to do something like that in a very generic kind of way. So we are dealing with a couple of specific issues that have been put before us, and we are very clear that we are going to take them very seriously. We can see that there may be vulnerabilities, and that's what we're going to tackle.
Madam Commissioner, thank you very much indeed. Really do appreciate the time. That is a Commissioner at the Electoral Commission, Janet Love, here in our studio at the Results Operations Centre of the Electoral Commission. All right, let's stay here. You can see perhaps the numbers scoreboard behind me. Let's go a little closer to that billboard now. And my colleague Mzwandile Mbeje, SABC senior political reporter, is standing by for you. Mzwandile, good evening.
Well, we are coming here from the floor where various stakeholders are here really to observe what is happening. And of course, there is that anxious wait from the political parties as that leaderboard is still empty. I think in the next few hours, we'll start to see some of the results coming through, and it will be interesting really to see what the political parties will be saying and how they will be feeling. Right now, I think everyone is still on equal footing, and everyone at the moment is still hoping for the best. But of course, the hard work must have been done 3 months ago, and it will only show today. But of course, as I've said, we have many stakeholders here, even some of those who are analyzing situations for us, either domestically or internationally. With me is Dr. Spamanda Zondi, who is a political analyst, particularly looking at issues of international relations. We just want to get a sense from perhaps the AU, the BRICS, how are they viewing our elections, given that we have strong relations with these people?
Yes, South Africa is a very important African country. For the African continent, the rhythm of South Africa's politics has a bearing on the rhythm of African politics. And when South Africa sneezes, the continent may catch a flu. So they looking to see what they could learn from South Africa's ability to cross this threshold again. It's been now 2 decades, full decades of democracy, and we're entering into the 3rd decade. We're in the middle of the 3rd decade, and with that comes a lot of challenges of consolidation, changes and realignment of politics. Parties that used to be dominant, they kind of slide down a little bit, new parties emerge, new energies, new things. So they're looking into this and thinking, what does it hold for them? Because South Africa will test the waters, and these things will start to apply on the African continent. So they'll be watching it very carefully to see how things are turning out, but to see how the leadership in South Africa, just across the board, is responding to the managing things. They will either be proud of us or they'll be ashamed.
Well, what is it that will make them very proud of us, and then what is it that will make them very ashamed of us?
What would make them proud is to see how parties are magnanimous, either in defeat or in difficulties. If they quick difficulties are that, the ability of the parties and the leaders to be magnanimous is a true mark of statesmanship and leadership. And it would please them also to see how the institutions in South Africa are shown to be working efficiently. The Independent Electoral Commission is one of those critical democracy institutions that the continent still has to grapple with. A lot of independent electoral bodies in Africa have to deal with lots of challenges that this one has been able to challenge. So that is why the challenge that they've even seen now, either the challenges with regards to inadequate printing of ballots or stuff like that, mistakes made by officials or complete dereliction of duty that have sent by how the body reacts to those mistakes. And if it acts with boldness, it acts with professionalism, fix things, it would send a positive signal to many African countries. And lastly, it would be about how this whole process concludes and how the country then transition back to getting work done in order to take an African child out of poverty. That would also assure them. What will make them ashamed is if the parties bicker so badly that they make their self-interest bigger than those of the country. If they're willing to pull the name of the country in the mud just in order to score a few more votes. If it turns out that some parties are not magnanimous in defeat, they resist, they create rumors, they create fake stories in order to contend with defeat. That will make a lot of countries ashamed of South Africa. But also, if South Africa does not find a way to immediately transition to the work of overcoming poverty very quickly, building the economy in a very serious way over a long period of time, the African countries will look back and say, nothing to be proud of.
But of course, I think in the past 25 years, there's been a lot of positives really coming from South Africa, perhaps that African countries have been admiring us about. But we do see some of the issues really that tend to mirror those that African countries have faced. Are we at that stage perhaps where we will be viewed as any other African country?
We are another African country, indeed, because the challenges that face Africa, the rest of Africa also face this part of Africa, poverty, inequality, difficulties, they face it. But they admire the fact over a period of time that we had been driven by a very strong vision. We understood that the development of South Africa would not succeed without the stability and the peacemaking of the African continent. And they've admired how we placed a lot of resources and used our pedigree internationally to champion the African cause at the United Nations and all around the world in the international community. They've been very pleased with that. They worried whether we are not soft pedaling on those kind of things, which is why you ended up with a Libya in 2011, which is why you ended up with a Morocco coming back to the AU, which is why you're ending up with Israel coming into the African, which is why we have smaller little countries that never get a Pan-African outlook, now taking a lead on the African continent. They worry whether we are not losing steam and interest in leading the African cause in a strong and a determined way. I hope they are wrong, because South Africa has to lead. It has an advantage of being the last born in the family, and therefore it has the wisdom of having seen everybody else, so it needs to lead.
Thank you very much, Dr. Zondi. That was Dr. Spamandla Zondi there, giving us a perspective really on how other African countries and perhaps the international community are viewing at us, especially as we engage in this process of a democratic system that everyone is championing for. Of course, we'll be coming to you throughout the night from the floor. There's a number of people that we'll be speaking to as the night progresses.
Mzwandile Mbeje on the floor of the centre just behind me here. Thank you very much indeed. Well, let's get a look at what the sort of more informed views are saying about this election, and also how the sort of prediction models work. We're going to start seeing the prediction models a little later in this election. As some of the results come in, some people are actually going to be making predictions of it. So joining us tonight, we have Angelo Fick, a well-known analyst, director of the Electoral Socio-Economic Research Institute, Professor Mcobisi Ntletiana is a professor of politics at the University of Johannesburg, and from the CSIR, Dr. Zaid Kimi joins us as well. Gentlemen, good evening. Thank you very much indeed for joining us. Professor Ntletiana, if I could start with you. I suppose in a way it's been a typical South African election. One or two problems, most people in pretty good spirits, almost everybody who wanted to vote got to vote, and generally we now wait for the result.
The usual protest here and there, 1 or 2 boxes lost, 5 or so voting stations not open, but overall and comparatively speaking, I think it's been a good day because we have more than 22,000 voting stations. So if you have 5 not open on time, really, you can't quite complain. And also some of these boxes, at times, you can trace them. In 2014, we had all sorts of boxes being lost, and people thought that, the elections were rigged. At the end of it, we realized that actually these boxes could be traced. So good job for the IEC, but some of the mistakes are quite elementary. Right? You understand that you're dealing with staff of about 190,000, 22,000 voting stations. Yes, it's a massive operation, but some of the mistakes are pretty much unforgivable, elementary stuff. So hopefully, certain things can be learned from this and not be repeated.
Angelo, are you more forgiving than Professor Ntletiana?
More forgiving. I think for me, this election, many people expected there to be a lot more drama, and so I think there's a lot of disappointment. I think much of the drama has to do with how technology has shifted over the elections, and so the way in which social media is used by, or are used by, politicians and their followers to do things that I think are going to become more and more irresponsible as time goes on, because people are already questioning issues that they really should be using the official mechanisms to do. So if they have videos of things that they think have gone wrong, the responsible thing to do is to send that to the IEC and follow the usual process. But by putting it out on social media, of course, you are indicating that should the result not go quite how you thought it would, you could use this as a kind of way of justifying why you think the election results are bad. And so responsible use of social media platforms by particularly party political officials might become something to look to in the elections beyond this one.
Now there's a whole night's worth of conversation about social media and cynicism right there. All right, we'll come back to this because I think it's a very important issue. I want to talk about predictions a little bit now. And Dr. Kimmy, you're with the CSIR. You produce some of these predictions. You have mathematical models. There's a reason why I'm doing this and not a maths professor. How exactly do these work, right? As I understand it, you know, a couple of voting stations can report and you immediately start making predictions. How on earth do you do that?
Well, a couple of voting stations, yeah. The very first voting station that comes in, we can generate a prediction, but that prediction is pretty much nonsense. So we do need some weight of numbers of voting stations to report, and we think anywhere between 3 and 5% gives us a very good chance of nailing the final result. How it's done? It's simple mathematics, really. If you believe that people voted randomly, you know, you woke up in the morning, you tossed a couple of dice, or you flipped a couple of coins and decided who you'd vote for, then none of these prediction algorithms would work. But because people have reasons for how they vote, and we think there are factors behind their choices, once a certain threshold of people have registered their choices, we can extrapolate from those to others in similar situations and believe that we can have a decent chance of saying how the final result will turn out.
Okay, that's sort of 5% of the vote that you need. Do you need a spread of the country? I mean, do you need suburban, township, urban, rural to develop that model? Or is it even so sophisticated it doesn't need that?
Well, part of why we need the 5% is we're assuming that 5% won't only be rural voting districts in the Eastern Cape. If that were the case, we would be in some trouble, but that hasn't ever happened yet. So the voting stations reported differential rates, but we think at about 5% enough different voting stations have reported that we'll have a handle on getting that final result right.
Okay, I mean, something like this, I mean, on the one level, it can be a bit risky. I mean, your reputation could literally go out the window. There are a couple of pollsters who might have that problem in the next little while. But at the same time, what you're also doing is creating a set of data which could be compared with the final set of data from the Electoral Commission. Now, we're quite a cynical country in some ways, but in a situation, and this is not the case here, let me stress, but in a situation in which results were going to be contested, you would have two sets of data to interrogate. I presume that makes your data quite valuable.
Yeah, in fact, in 1994, when this modeling process started, it was a far more chaotic election. You'll recall no voters' rolls, various forms of identification required. The IEC asked the CSIR to check post-fact whether there were anomalous results from voting stations. And using that basic set of research, we were able to develop the algorithm. So its initial reason for being was in fact to check for fraud or illegitimate results. We didn't find any in 1994, and I'm pretty sure there'll be none in 2019.
It's very interesting. I mean, Angelo, do you think that when you've got someone predicting results, I mean, does it take some of the fun out of it, or is there a value in creating that second set of data?
Well, I think, firstly, the word prediction might allow some people to believe that, you know, it is prediction. And I think the technical term there for me was extrapolation. It's based on data, it's based on a statistical model, and so it's only prediction in its technical sense that it's suggesting that based on these results, those results are likely to be. I don't think it's a spoil at all. I think what it does allow is for people to prepare themselves, and also that there is all sorts of other pieces of information or data generated by that process that becomes useful in a scientific process both during and after. And so there is the science that has to be respected. And those of us who look at it and go, oh, it's a bit like knowing what you're going to get for Christmas or for Hanukkah or for whatever, that's neither here nor there. The science, I think, is important because what it does is produces large sets of data that can be used comparatively from election to election that now goes back 25 years and that is useful for people who want to do research on voting patterns, voting behavior and statistical analysis.
I suppose, Professor Ntletiana, it's one of those situations, the more data you have, the more valuable it is.
The important thing is why people vote the way they do. There are a lot of variables that we are very keen to follow. For instance, there's been a lot of prediction about white voters, for instance, voting for Cyril Ramaphosa. So of the support that the ANC will get, assuming it wins, the interesting question would be, did it get that support from across a wide racial spectrum, right? So we'll go into areas that are predominantly white and check how those voting stations voted. So you will have the results inevitably, even without their predictions, right? That's a given. But the more interesting thing is the analytical value out of that. Why do people vote the way they do, right? You might have an EFF scoring about 17%, 18%. That tells you about a surge, continuing surge of populism. Where is it happening? Why? So if you have that surge of populism, then that tells you that there's something wrong with the system, right? That, you know, you are looking at a few problems ahead. So the why part of it, for me, is quite interesting. Well, for political parties to know that they've won or not, it's a lot of excitement. But for scholars, the data that comes of that to answer the why, it's even more interesting.
Dr. Kimmy, I mean, when you try and assemble this data, how many people do you need to do it, or do you just need a really fancy laptop?
Well, you'd be surprised at the number of things that can go wrong, even with what's ostensibly quite a simple process. So there's a team of about 7 or 8 people, programmers and applied mathematicians. And, you know, the model isn't static. We test it and we try and improve it. And yeah, you know, in some ways it can be considered frivolous, in the sense that if we all just sat back and waited, then the results would come to us. We don't need the intermediate step. But human beings have a natural aversion to uncertainty, which is why people have horoscopes and you know, fortune tellers and the like. So this, I think, fills a gap. In the period where there's some uncertainty about what the result is going to be, we can fill that knowledge gap by saying, well, it's not that uncertain. We think we know where we're going.
We're going to go back to the floor in a moment, and Mzwandile Mbeje is standing by. But Professor Ndledian, I do want to put this to you, okay? Around the country now, probably all in Joburg somewhere, are different groups of politicians, all working on what I would call their post-election spin, right? So they're trying to work out how well they've done, and they're trying to get their excuses ready, or their victory speeches ready, or their, oh my gosh, I've actually won, and what do I do now ready. I would imagine a model like this is very useful. You get 24 hours notice of what's going to happen. I mean, it's interesting to me that there aren't any very senior political leaders here now, because they don't want anyone to capture their face when some of the results come in.
Well, the last time around in 2016, the CSR called it around 10, saying the ANC would lose Tshwane, Joburg, and PE. No one wanted to believe that, right? So their speeches were not ready, and I think some of them disputed those predictions, right? But for now, well, I guess there are no excuses, David. Well, people will come up with rain as an excuse, that the IC voting station is not opening. Might be another excuse. But ultimately, though, the operation has been perfect. It's been a work of art. So they have no reason to dispute anything other than simply accept.
All right, Mzwandile, we're going to go to you in a sec. I do want to just do this. I'm going to stand up and just see if we have any results yet, because we can hit the refresh button, and you can watch this with me. So we'll just click on there. We'll hit the enter button. Total valid votes, I'm afraid, is still 0. All right, Mzwandile Mbeje, you're on the floor. You're standing next to Jeff Radebe, I believe, the Minister of Energy. Mzwandile, good evening once again.
Oh yes, Stephen. I guess in the next few hours, so he will still be as welcoming in terms of speaking to us as he is now. He is the member of the ANC NEC. That's his capacity right now. So I'm not necessarily going to call him the minister, because I think he is more on the party right now. Minister, or rather, NEC member, if I may call you that. So you are expectantly waiting for the results right now, and you do appear to be confident. So is that confidence justified, or is just a show of faith?
Not at all. We're very confident as the ANC. You yourself, you were there at this park on Saturday. You saw the huge crowds that were there, not only in Ellis Park, but in the Johannesburg Stadium, in Limpopo, in Durban, in Pietermaritzburg. As the President said on Saturday, the ANC is on a march to victory, and that victory is today. I myself was in Durban this morning, in Kwamashu, where I cast my vote. The people came in droves, singing the ANC. You could see that in their faces and even the manner they were articulating themselves, that this time round they want to give us an overwhelming majority. And I also went to Northwest Matipeng area where I visited about 5 voting stations. The same mood of positivity I experienced. Right now, I just come from Ward 71 here in Tshwane, in Atteridgeville. I can tell you right now that even the reports that we're getting from many parts of the country is very positive. But having said that, we are worried that some South Africans have not been able to exercise their constitutional right because the voting station in some areas opened very late, if they were opened at all. So we do hope that the IEC will do the right thing of making sure that the constitutional rights of those South Africans is not denied, by making sure that a way is found those people to vote.
How much do you think there was rain in some parts of the country, and of course there was protests in others? How much do you think that will affect perhaps the voter turnout and perhaps even the results for you as the ANC?
Well, we are worried that in many of those areas that are in dispute at the present moment in time, those are the strongholds of the ANC. But as a democratic organization, people have their inherent right to vote or not to vote. The point that I'm trying to portray right now is that when people who have registered to vote, they present themselves in a correct voting district, they should not be denied that right to vote. So the IEC, as an independent Chapter 9 institution, must take a correct decision so that those people must vote.
Minister, given that you are very confident, just give me your prediction. I know that in the next few hours that prediction may be nullified or affirmed.
No, I wouldn't want to make a prediction, but I think we're going to get an overwhelming majority. Maybe the party that will be following us will be right down there, but I have no doubt in my mind that the mood in South Africa, the mood of renewal, the mood of hope, the strong leadership that President Ramaphosa has demonstrated since February of 2018 indicates that people want, together with the ANC, to grow South Africa for jobs, for investment. Is already driving a $100 billion investment into South Africa. An investment summit was held in November last year. At the end of the day, more than 300 billion rand was committed by the private sector, both locally and internationally.
Thank you very much. And of course, there he is basically saying there will be an overwhelming victory for the ANC. But of course, it doesn't want to put the numbers. And well, he doesn't have to do that because in the next few days or hours, so we'll definitely know those numbers. Stephen?
Thanks very much indeed. Well, my panel's still with me, and I suppose very interesting in a way. Angelo Fick, Professor Professor Mkubisi Ndlediana, and Dr. Zaid Kimi. I mean, interesting that he wasn't going to put a number to it, because we have the one person who probably can put a number to it. So, Dr. Kimi, I mean, just to wrap up, I know you have to go. I know you've got some predictions to make. You've got a laptop somewhere that needs to be warmed up. Once you've got that 5% of the vote you were talking about, you said that once you have those 5% of the votes reported, you could then make a prediction. How long does that take? I mean, do you literally put the number into a formula, onto an app somewhere, or does it take a bit more than
someone presses a button. I don't think they even press buttons anymore. I think they just wave at the laptop. And 5 or 6 hours, no, just kidding. 3 seconds later, out it pops.
Sure.
Yeah, smart laptops, and smart people.
You'll let us bring a camera for that moment, won't you? Dr. Zaid Kimi, thank you. I'm going to release you. There was a little bit of a vote, I must say. We are democratic here at the SABC. We all agreed that we need the prediction. So we are going to release Dr. Kimi from the CSIR. Thank you very much indeed. Let's just have a look. Okay, we refreshed this a moment ago, and you'll see that none of the votes have yet been counted. I did just want to remind you, as I, well, Excuse me, Angelo, sorry about that. As I just fall over that, there is a resource for you here, and this resource, of course, is the SABCnews.com website. Really worth going to if you're looking for any information about the elections, for the latest results. There's analysis as well. What's particularly useful, of course, is if you want to go and do some checks and go and compare how parties have performed in the past. And then just a reminder, of course, the main website of the day, the one that you're looking at really, is the Electoral Commission. That's iec.org.za. And you can go and get the results from there. As you can see, none of the votes have yet been counted, but all of the parties are actually represented there. You can go into the provinces as well, and it is probably there that you're going to find the most detailed information. I'm going to sit back down again now and continue our conversation. Sorry about that, Angela. It will happen again, I'm afraid.
No one was at risk.
Okay. So we've had a day that I would say reminds a lot of people of 1994. It reminds us a little bit of the Madiba era, the idea that everyone votes, everyone is equal in this particular act of political action. And so in a strange way, I would like to ask you this question, Professor Mhletiana. Can voting day be quite uniting? And can the receiving of the results divide us once again?
I think everyone by now accepts that democracy is the most preferred form of government, that we are committed to democratic principles. No one contests even the idea of voting, right? And that's a good thing, because it means we prefer to solve things through rules, participating in institutions instead of facing each other with knobkiris on the street, right? But of course, the results will divide us, because everyone wants to be in parliament, everyone wants to be president, right? But what then guarantees that the outcome will be accepted is the integrity of the rules. If the process is fair, if it is transparent and everyone agrees that the rules were observed, then there's no reason for results to divide us, unless there are certain instances that cannot be explained. Then you have a problem. But even there, you do have an electoral court. First, you have the IEC, which will look at these disputes, and everyone agrees that the IEC has carried itself fairly well so far. The party political structure that they have discusses these things, and they all come to some agreement. If they can't agree, then they can take that to the electoral court. So there is a clearly spelled out mechanism, even in instances where they don't agree on results. And ultimately, because they accept the legitimacy of the system, that you have credible people selected through a rigorous system that ensures that the entire system has integrity. And out of that institutional integrity come acceptable and legitimate results.
Angela, can I pick up on this with you? I remember Professor Stephen Friedman, a colleague of yours, I'm sure you'll know Professor Friedman. He's written once that in 1994, at the IEC as it was then, there was a question around how do you decide if the election is free and fair and legitimate? And in the end, the answer they came to is if the losers accept the results. Which, I mean, philosophically, I suppose makes sense. I don't know if there is a better way of doing it. It's very important in any system for the people who don't win to accept the results.
So let's not forget that in the 25 years that have passed, institutions of state have been created precisely to deal with this. So 1994, on the eve of and in the middle of what is essentially a civil war inside the country at a low-grade level, it was important for the losers to accept the result, for that to be free and fair. In 2019, I think there are other ways in which to check, which include the data mechanisms for checking, the monitoring systems, but also, should the losers not accept the result, we wouldn't have the consequences that we would have had in 1994, because those losers now have, among other things, a court system that they can go to inside the electoral system, and any kind of extra, shall we say, systemic approach would be considered to be anti-state and deeply insurgent, and would be dealt with in terms of the Constitution. So the constitutional order is, I think, central, and no one is going to storm the citadels of power because they're unhappy with the result. And if they do, the state would, again, shall we say, declare its monopoly of violence and rein those people in.
Okay, one of the things that's going to happen after this is there'll be the ceremonies in Parliament, the swearing in of the MPs. Chief Justice Mogoeng will preside over that. Then there'll be the election of a president, then a state, then an inauguration, and all the rest. There'll be a big conversation about the cost of that. In some ways, there already has been. Could I put a counter-argument to suggest that one of the things that's quite important after an election is actual ceremonies of state that serve as a moment of unity? That, in other words, for example, you have, and it can be small things. In the past, we've had concerts where, you know, people from all communities have sung to, you know, people outside the union buildings, for example. Are those kind of rituals that we often complain about the cost of, are they actually quite important to building that sense of nationhood or statehood after an election, which could be quite divisive?
So those forms of statecraft that manufacture the consent into this idea that this is a unified nation. But we must also be careful that we don't just take them at face value, because we have a 25-year legacy of having such constructions of nationhood that then become, you know, have consequences that people question because they often cover over. It's sort of the face of banal nationalism, to use the phrase of Michael Billig. We fly the flags, we sing the anthem, we feel good about ourselves, and we suture over the gaps that, you know, threaten the unity and leave those gaps unattended, and as a result there's actual real fracturing.
Okay. Professor Ntletiana, I mean, when we look at what happens from here, I mean, for the first thing to say is that a lot of people are going to drink a lot of coffee over the next couple of days. And once they get through that, a lot of people are going to have to sort of think again. I mean, some of the electoral strategies that we've seen might have backfired. Some of them might not have worked. We've seen elections where one leader of a party, he's not a former leader yet, has had to eat his hat. I mean, we're likely to see a little bit of introspection from some of the parties, I would say.
And some of them won't be around by Sunday or Monday. But I think parties, there's going to be a lot of jostling, a lot of informal negotiations, especially if some of the results point to a possible coalition. And say, for instance, the ANC's majority comes down, which means that some folks are going to lose jobs, then you might have to figure out where do you place those people, right? So because we tend to think that this is simply a democratic ritual. Yes, it is a ritual, but at the same time, it's employment for a number of people. So, you know, some people are going to be quite anxious, and you are going to have serious negotiations happening.
All right, you're live tonight. We're here on SABC2 and on the SABC News channel, and we are, of course, bringing you the latest from the results. We are expecting some of the results. We're not sure when. We spoke to the Commissioner, Janet Love, a Commissioner of the Electoral Commission, about an hour ago. She suggested that we might get some results sometime between 10, 11, 12 and possibly 1 o'clock. Joining us as we wait for the results, of course, we have Angelo Fick, the well-known analyst, and we have Professor Mcobisi Ntletiana, Professor of Politics at the University of Johannesburg. All right, let's go to Mzwandile Mbeje now. He's my colleague, senior political reporter. He's on the floor by all of the political parties. He's going to take you through what's happening there and speak to some of the political leaders. Mzwa, who are you with?
Stephen, shortly, I think there is the DA chairperson is just around. It's someone that I'm supposed to speak to right now, James Self. He will probably be joining us. I think he was supposed to come here, but I think he just went past because he was hoping that we were going to go that side. Because as you can see here, Stephen, it's quite wide. So mostly this side would be the ANC and many other parties, but perhaps the big two, the ANC and EFF, are on that side. So I think they were hoping that we were going to go to them as well and speak to them as we were speaking to the people here. But of course, we'll continue as soon as they are around. We'll continue to speak to them and really share what is it that they wanted to share with us. I mean, they've been saying so many things ahead of the elections, telling us that they were going to win this election, and the moment is now, Stephen. So they would have to then stick to that word when the results come, and we'll then continue to analyze them and go deeper to check what would have gone wrong, what would have gone right. So this is quite an interesting moment. So as we find many guests, so we'll then continue to come to them, speak to them, and come to you as the night progresses.
What's happening now?
And then, Stephen, what normally happens, which we are still waiting from the IEC right now, is that there will be probably that first station. You know, there are some of those small stations, perhaps from the Robben Island, that normally post first. So I think as everyone is seated here, I think it's basically waiting to see which station will post first and perhaps give an indication of where will this go. But as you know, the number of those people who vote in those stations is so small. As a result, you can't then conclusively say who is really leading. But I think it's significant in the fact that every time there will be a party that will lead first based on those results. So what we do expect, though, from here is that the clearer picture perhaps will start emerging around tomorrow morning. I know that those who predict these kinds of results will say after perhaps 10% has come in, then they would be able to then give us an indication of what will happen to the whole results. Of course, I am with now James Self of the DA, who will then tell us what is it that he's expecting. Of course, they've been telling us that they are winning this election, and I'm going to ask that question now to him to say, are you still confident you are winning this election?
Well, we set ourselves 3 objectives in this election. The first was to grow our share of the national vote. The second was to retain control of the Western Cape. And the third was to bring the ANC to under 50% in at least another province. We are confident that we are on track to achieve all those 3 objectives. We think we will grow our share of the national vote. We think we will retain the Western Cape. And we think that we will push the ANC beneath 50% in Gauteng.
I think the opinion polls, I know they've not been giving us the same results, but there are those which have been predicting a decline for the DA, and of course others an increase. So your internal polling, so what is it telling you?
Well, it's telling us exactly that, that the objectives for which we set ourselves are within our grasp. We do not believe the polls, or at least not all the polls. The polls that are closest and most accurate to ours are that conducted by the Institute of Race Relations, but even they employ methodology that we don't employ. And so we think that our own internal polls are probably more accurate.
You have basically said you hope to bring the ANC below 50, particularly in Gauteng. So do you have someone in mind that you are willing to work with to go into a coalition? I know that in municipalities you are working with EFF, but you've been exchanging perhaps unpleasant words. So who is it, or who is the preferred candidate for you for coalition?
Well, during an election, one always exchanges unpleasant words. That's the nature of an election. But we also don't make up our minds who we're going to work with until the figures appear on that screen up there. And once they appear on the screen, then we know whether a coalition is possible, and if so, with whom we should coalesce. And under those circumstances, then you will see us starting to talk to other political parties here on the floor.
Okay, let me sum up what you are telling me. So you are open to any coalition with anybody, including the EFF and the ANC?
No, I'm saying we are open to coalitions with parties that share our objectives for South Africa and who are prepared to work with us to achieve our program of action. We have done a very careful analysis of the manifestos of all the other political parties that have contested, and we have found areas of commonality and areas of difference. What we would then do is engage those organizations in discussions about the areas of consensus and the areas of disagreement to find out how flexible other political parties were in moving away from those areas of disagreement.
One last answer from you. Is the EFF one of those parties?
I think the EFF is one of those parties, although there are a number of red lines in their manifesto which would make it reasonably difficult for us to work together.
Thank you very much, Mr. Self. There was James Self there, the member, or rather one of the leaders of the DA, really telling us that they are prepared to work with anyone who will be able to advance their cause, because they are saying in terms of their objectives, they would be able to achieve those objectives. In terms of those objectives, they are basically saying they want to bring the ANC under 50%, particularly in Gauteng, and they also want to do to increase their share of the national vote, and they believe they are within their grasp to doing that. So we'll continue, of course, giving you this kind of information and analysis as we go to the commercial break.
Solani Mkiva says that they believe that the king should be released and that they are not being opportunistic.
The last 4 years, we have been engaging with government. It cannot be a post-colonial government that begins to jail a king in a context of what actually happened.
Bobby Solomons, he's the spokesperson of the Alex Shutdown Committee, the multi-billion rand Alexander Renewal Project. Nothing came of that.
Community wants to know what really happened to the monies.
The creative director of the label, Mansu, that of course means black is beautiful in Sesotho. What has been your experience in that regard, given some of the more established labels that you have managed to work with?
It is hard. 15 years is a long time. There's a lot of sacrifice for your family to make for you.
This is the thing. This is it this morning.
We're explorers. We always have been. Endlessly curious. Always looking for answers. For new frontiers. For new stories. Because that is who we are. From script to screen. From yelling action to taking you on a journey. Radio producers, script writers, on-air presenters, news reporters, sports analysts. We spend late nights creating captivating storylines and earlier mornings keeping you informed, educated, and entertained. For us, it's not a job, it's a calling. We do this and more because you do your part. SABC TV licenses, made possible by you.
I use my name first and foremost, that's all I heard, and from using the name I got a small loan of 8,000 rand.
I remember there is a time la sa zama kumfunela umsebenzi.
Welcome back. You're on SABC 2 tonight, and of course the SABC News Channel 404. I have two guests with me. We'll continue speaking and analysing, if you like, the pre-election results phase of this election. We're waiting for those first results to come forward. Mzwandile Mbeje, my colleague, senior political reporter here at the SABC, he's standing by on the floor. He'll be with a guest from the Economic Freedom Fighters in a moment or two. And I imagine key among some of the questions that we're going to be hearing about will be about the subject of coalition. So with me here, Professor Mcebisi Ntletiana from the University of Pretoria and Angelo Fick from the Awal Socioeconomic Research Institute. Professor Ntletiana, I think in the last conversation that Mzondile Mbeje had with the Democratic Alliance there, National Chair James Self, or Chair of the Federal Council rather, James Self, the prospect of coalitions comes up, and once we start talking about coalitions, we almost never get away from it. Are you expecting protracted negotiations after these elections?
Possibly, and the DA has had the longest experience with coalitions. Remember, coalitions started, especially at the local government level, started in the year 2000. And so far we've had about 124, actually, coalitions throughout the country. And the largest number of them have been in the Western Cape and KZN. And the DA managed to consolidate itself through those coalitions. So it's an expert of all these parties, right? And even in 2016, they started negotiating before the elections because they could tell the signs, partly because of that experience. So we are going to have that. I mean, James Self was quite quick to say, well, we might have said unpleasant things during this election, and nonetheless, you know, we are friends, so to speak, right? So it's a possibility because you have to form a government. It's not the best thing you would want to do because coalitions by nature are unstable. You have different temperaments, people who have never worked together. They have a lot of showmanship and all that stuff, so it's not an ideal situation.
All right, Professor Ntletiana, thank you. I'm going to ask you to hold that thought. Let's go back to Mzondile Mbeje on the floor now. Mzondile, you have a guest from the Economic Freedom Fighters this evening.
Oh yes, Stephen, indeed, we are continuing here on the floor. There are many parties, and of course, I've just spoken to the DA, and I see the leader of the DA is shaking hands with the leader of the IFP. Hello, ma'am.
Hi.
I see you trying to run away from me.
Never. Why would I want to do that? Or you want to give me reasons to run away from you?
Yeah. No, basically, I just want to know, here you are, you seem very confident. So do you think the EFF will do wonders?
Yeah, we are. We've already done wonders. I mean, I don't think I know. We're the only political party who was on the ballot in 2014 and again now in 2019 who we know is going to increase votes. And that's a fact. So victory is certain right over there.
So where are you putting yourself? And you know,
all those questions about predictions, we'll wait until the results come. But we do know we're going to increase our votes, and that in itself is a victory for the EFF.
I was speaking to the DA, and then we were speaking about the issue of coalitions, and they are basically saying, so in the event they manage to bring the ANC below 50%, so they are very open to working with you as the EFF.
Oh, good luck to them. Look, we haven't entertained any coalition talks yet. Come and speak to us. And I think the media is also getting ahead of themselves. Let us get the results. Let us go back to the drawing board as political parties, speak to our leadership, speak to our collective, and then we'll make decisions from there on how we're going to move forward. But right now, it's just too soon to talk about coalitions.
Are you nervous?
No, not at all. We're not nervous at all. We put in the work. What we are very, very concerned about is what has been happening in terms of how the IEC has rolled out election day, the fact that people have been able to remove, Lisa was just saying how she removed her, that black, the marker with the baby wipe. Yeah. And people are going multiple times to vote, voting stations not opening, people being turned away from voting. And that's their constitutional right. It's a human rights issue. So those are things that we are extremely, extremely concerned about. And not because in 2014 and 2016 the EFF had taken decisions that we're not going to object, because, we did the math and we said, like, in the bigger scheme of things, is this whole thing worth it? But we will consolidate all the reports. As you know, that we've got footprint across the entire country. So right now our op center at Bertude is consolidating all the reports from our party agents, and then we'll make an informed decision on how we're going to handle this matter. I mean, we'll even disturb that they have the army on standby. Like, why? Why is electricity going out when these are all issues we raised to the lead up to the elections?
Oh, thank you very much, Lee. So we hope we'll be speaking to you very soon.
Yeah, as the victory party, political party, yeah.
Okay. Of course, you can see, and there are many other people here who are ready to speak to us. This is the NFP, the National Freedom Party. So you are here. You did very well in 2014, not so much in 2016. So what are your prospects?
Yeah, assuming that we are coming from a very bad era of 2016, we are positioning ourselves that we'll use this opportunity as a payback time. So our wish is to double the number that we've got in 2014. And then we are also preparing for the 2021 where we'll be doing very well. And then we also think that we'll try to increase the numbers with the limited budget that we're operating. It was very bad since we lost the councillors. But we have a hope that we'll come back again. So this is a payback time.
Thank you very much. Of course, we are continuing with the coverage, so we'll still be speaking to you and we'll still be checking what is happening with other parties as we head back to studio.
Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed, Imzwandile Mbeja, senior political reporter here at the SABC, keeping you up to date with what's happening on the floor. There were my guests, Angelo Fick and Professor Mkhabisi Ntletiana. Okay, Angelo Fick, I mean, in a way, listening to... Okay, I'm just being told now that we're going to Johannesburg, excuse me. We'll go to our national centre now, the headquarters of the SABC in Auckland Park. Standing by for you, Tsepiso Mokwetla and Griselda Lewis.
Well, thanks a lot for that, Stephen. So we're now moving towards a very crucial time. We do know that the IEC, according to the forecast that they've given us, that the first results will start rolling in at about 12 o'clock. And we hear, Griselda, that the podium there at the Rock Centre is being prepared. So that probably means a press conference anytime soon.
Possible first results may trickle in, but of course we'll have to wait and see if that's what's going to happen with all the movement that's taking place at the Rock. But of course, thank you very much to our colleague Stephen Grootes. We'll be crossing to him. But there's something quite particular that I looked at there, Tsepiso, when I saw James Self speaking to Leanne Matthys from the EFF.
So,
and I'm like, Leanne says it's too soon to speak about coalitions.
Well, it's probably too soon to form any, but it's not too soon to start talking about the possibilities. But we'll also see what people are saying on social media shortly, and we'll of course tell you about the reports that we're getting, because we are seeing on Twitter some people suggesting that at the Marlborough Gautrain polling station that there were queues there, people still going in, and we'll also monitor Alexandra. Our colleague Makgeketla Mohlabe is there keeping an eye on that.
And in fact, we'll be crossing to him just shortly after 11 o'clock. It is after 11 o'clock. So very shortly, we might be crossing to our colleague Makgeketla Mohlabe in Alexandra. You'd know, of course, in the run-up to this election, one of the areas that there was a lot of focus on, you saw political parties really digging in, campaigning in that particular area over quite a number of service delivery concerns that residents in that area had raised. We're also not forgetting to welcome our viewers on SABC2. Thank you very much for staying with us. I hope you'll do so throughout the morning, from evening into the morning.
All right, so Griselda, let's see what's going on the social media front. Lots of activity. Shante, tell us more about that.
Yes, thank you very much, Tsepiso and Griselda. And of course, welcome to our SABC2 viewers. We're tracking the pulse of the polls through the online heartbeat on social media every hour on Eye on Elections. I am joined in studio by social media expert Yavi Manurai, Managing Director of Black Box Theory. And of course, we have been doing so all throughout the course of Election Results Week. Well, Yavi joins us now in studio. We're having a look at some of the trends that we've been seeing specifically today. Let's first talk the hashtag that's currently trending, SA Elections 2019, and the exposure that we've seen.
So, and the stats will come up, but we've been monitoring this since Monday. And in this particular hashtag, because of the fact that every single person wants to tag it in their post, whether they've voted already, whether it's the thumbs, whether it's whatever, it has created quite a stir. The exposure, as you can see, that little circle, blue circle to the right and in the middle, well, the three blue circles on the right and the one in the middle specifically, shows a 7.3 million exposure. Now, what goes into that? That means that there is actual tweets and actual information, so whether it's Facebook posts or whatever the case is, and then retweets and reshares, reposts, people commenting. So that is quite a large figure. but we'll see it grow, especially once we get into hashtag election results.
Yeah, sure. It's the day one. We are expecting some of those results to possibly come in early hours of the morning. And then we've also seen the other comparison there between political parties.
So let me take you through it. We've put it through in order of least to most. So if we look at the DAs, which is right at the top, now we just spoke about 7.3 million for SA elections. So we're looking at 21 exposure for the I voted DA. I voted ANC is just under 21,000, and I voted EFF is 300,000.
Quite interesting. Well, we'll be staying online as the tracking that we've been giving you that. Let's also now have a look at the thumbprint pictures that we're also expected to see. We've also been seeing those thumbprint pictures saying hashtag take a picture so that I know that it's real.
Yeah.
And also the manicures, making sure that the manicures are in line with those pictures. This one comes in from America_Zasa on Twitter. What an important day in my country. I'm a proud citizen. Hashtag I voted. This one also coming in quick, painless and easy, and I met my brother and sister in the voting booths. Lasizwe, of course, he's not shy to social media. I went out and I voted. Pouts and everything. And this one coming in, it's refreshing to see the amount of young ones who came out to vote. My vote might not make a difference in your eyes, but it just might be the difference for the kids' future. Hashtag SA decides, and of course that hashtag there, SA elections. Now there've also been some videos that we've also seen come through. Specifically the funnier ones.
Of course.
So what are we expecting from that, Jack?
So we've got a couple of videos that have, look, and there's lots to choose from. So we chose just kind of as and when we picked it up and what we saw the most engagement on.
Yeah.
So there's a little guy that's from, in vernacular, talks about who this person is that he's wearing. I'm not going to give too much away when the video comes up. But there's also all of this information that comes through in the video. So people have realized that they need to video themselves, you know, as opposed to taking a picture, which we're normally used to. So the videos have started, oh, this is the Kifness and Musi Maimani. So for those of you that haven't seen it as yet.
Musi Maimane, Musi Maimane, Musi Maimane, Musi Maimane, Musi Maimane. I wanna get my money, so I vote for Musi Maimane. Musi Maimane, Musi Maimane, Musi Maimane, Musi Maimane, Musi Maimane, Musi Maimane. I wanna get my money, so I vote for Musi Maimane. All these other haters shop at picking.
Well, of course, just one of the many music videos, memes and videos that we've seen come out on, of course, the video streaming with regards to tweets. Let's have a look at another video that we've also seen coming in. This one's called the Tuma Mina video on Twitter.
What's the Mazlo? That's the one 1914. 1914? Yeah. Okay. Dangan. Salary Dangan. Yeah. Oh. Dangan, you can right. Yeah.
Well, that's a wrap up of our social media, at least for now. We'll continue to keep you updated at what's been coming through online. For now, though, let's cross back to the Rock in Pretoria for SABC News. Mzwandile Mbeje is standing by.
Thank you very much. With me now is the spokesperson of COPE, Dennis Bloom. Mr. Bloom, so you're expecting an improved result. I mean, in 2014, it wasn't good.
Yeah, no, we are very confident that we will have a very positive results this time, not like 2014. We have worked very hard on the ground. That's why we are positive that our results will be better than 2014.
So you've done something different this time?
We have done something different, but the most important thing is the stability in the party. Over the 2009 to 2014, there was a lot of infight and court cases, but since 2014, no more court cases. That's why we are confident that we will do better.
Thank you very much, Mr. Bloom. COPE achieved 3 seats in 2014, going down from 30 in 2009. That is why he is saying they are very hopeful that they'll do better this time, because he says those court cases and the infighting that characterized that period was no longer there this time around. But of course, with me here is Sabelo Dumezweni, the spokesperson of ATA, and you'd remember that ATA is the organization that represents primarily the taxes. Are you confident that you have done enough to garner enough votes to go to Parliament?
Yes, we've been throughout the country. The tax industry itself, which is the brainchild of ATA, it has a national footprint, and we are confident we have done our bit, but we could not because of the limitations. We could not reach everybody because of the limitations of funding and so on. That is the same story throughout all the new parties.
But how were you received, particularly from your constituency, the tax industry, which is quite big?
Yes, we were received very well, and to our surprise, but not everybody. People are not like a river. They will never flow in the same direction at the same time. Yes, there are those who are hesitant here and there, but generally about 80% of the industry has accepted us.
Thank you very much. There was Sabelo Dumezweni basically saying, as the taxi industry, they are hoping to do very, very well because their interests, they want them to be represented. They feel the kind of subsidies that are happening to other sectors are not being extended to them as the taxi industry. I think that's why they really want representation on their own. But of course, there are other parties like the old parties that we know, AZAPO. But interestingly, AZAPO is not in Parliament. So are you going back to Parliament? And if you are, what are you hoping to achieve in terms of seats?
Well, certainly AZAPO is going back to Parliament this time around. We have done more than enough, and we have no doubt in our minds that our performance will be far much better than all the performances in the previous elections.
So have you identified those issues really that took you out of Parliament? I mean, you are an old party that is known with a rich struggle history.
Yeah, certainly we have identified the areas where we haven't performed well. And in this current campaign, we have done things completely differently. And that's why we're confident that we'll go back to Parliament.
Projections?
Well, at this point in time, it's very difficult to give any projections because the reports that we are getting now is that the voter turn-up has not been that very good. But we are confident that we will get more seats than we've ever got in Parliament.
Thank you very much, Sam. There is the AZAPO there basically saying this time around they are hoping to go back to Parliament. Remember, so from 2014 up until now, so they were not represented because they were not able to garner enough votes to take them to Parliament during the 2014 elections. So we did speak earlier to the taxis who also believe that it's their time, their interests, they want those interests to be represented in Parliament. They feel the current system or the current leaders that are in Parliament are actually not representing them. So we'll continue to speak to other parties. Remember, 48 of them are contesting this election as we hand back to Steve.
Mzwandile Mbeje, thanks very much indeed. Senior political reporter here at the SABC, and of course he is live for you tonight from the floor. We'll probably just take the whole studio live there in a little while at some point just to get the latest from there. All right, let's just get some more analysis now, and as we wait for the elections, it might actually be time to hit refresh button on that Electoral Commission website. Maybe we should just do that quickly and see what we can actually see if there is any kind of response from it. But it doesn't look like we have any votes counted yet, I'm afraid, but we'll keep a very close eye on that. Angelo Fick, the political analyst, Professor Nkobisi Ntletiana with us as well. Let's just talk about the smaller parties for a moment. Angelo, if we look at the NFP, I mean, there's a movie in the history of this party. It's sort of formed from a breakaway from the IFP. There's one central figure to it. Then there's skullduggery somewhere because they forget to pay their deposits for the local government elections in 2016. And then they seem to almost be disappearing.
Well, the tragedy is also that you start off as a party with particular local issues and then you overreach by going to the National Assembly. And then you dilute your issues also by having, hampered then by a leader who goes ill. And so this is, I think, the challenge for any small party, that overreaching in the National Assembly where you have such a small representation that you lose touch with the ground issues that got you into power in municipal government is a real risk for the other small parties. Much of this might be a bit of a lotto ticket because people get to go to Parliament and they get 1.2 million a year of taxpayers' money to sit there and do what they promised to do, but that there is no real mechanism by which to hold them to account.
Professor, I mean, one of the parties that was formed in this way and yet is still with us is the African Independence Congress, the AIC, over the grievance around Matatiele and where the border is between the Eastern Cape and KwaZulu-Natal. It seems, I mean, in a way, it almost got its wish. It held the balance of power in Ekurhuleni, had a lever to use against the ANC, and it's just never pulled the lever.
Well, the reason they got those votes was because they always placed close to the ANC on the ballot paper. And now they've been separated. I think they might just be at the bottom of the ballot paper, so quite possible they might die. Yes, they've used this leverage to get certain things from the ANC, but never got to a point of pulling the lever, right? It's kind of brinkmanship politics of sorts. But the NFP, the most interesting part is that, for me at least, is that it's typical of patron-based parties, right? The party formed around a strong personality that is charismatic. And these parties most of the time are not entirely democratic. EFF, same thing. Olomisa, same thing. IFP, same thing. And they are not going anywhere because as soon as they leave, the party dies. With Magwaza Msibi, she fell ill, terribly ill. And with her illness, the party also fell ill, actually. And there was a vacuum for a year or two, and they started fighting because they wouldn't agree on whether or not they should have fresh elections because they thought that they were indebted to her. They couldn't imagine the idea of someone taking over the party. And what happened? They fought, and the result was that they didn't register for the 2016 election, and from there it's been a downward spiral. So the fate of patronage-based parties is not good, because it's intense loyalty, mindless loyalty to a leader, which is quite different from mass-based parties where you have alternative leaders emerging. I mean, the reason why Gachab Chilisi says he's returning at 91, I mean, for God's sake, 91. Is because it's a traditional party led by a chief, founded by a chief, led by a chief, and if the chief goes, so goes the party.
It's interesting you mention that. You talk about the smaller parties, you mentioned numerous examples to justify what you say, but Angela, I mean, the Freedom Front Plus, I would say, is also a small party, and yet seems to be different, and yet it's very much a family affair. I mean, I think at one point, all four of its MPs were related to each other. I mean, one was the dad, and one was the sort of, one was their father, brother-in-law or something. I mean, and yet it seems to be not going from strength to strength, but from 1% to 1.5% maybe.
So there I think it's slightly different because there is a particular agenda at work in that party that isn't only about that represents a particular ethnic group or ethnic identity, an idea of a certain kind of politics around representing what it calls the Afrikaner cause and representing farmer causes. What I think people are looking to the Freedom Front Plus this election is how, in its attempt to broaden its appeal. So in the Western Cape, for example, it has a former tricameral parliament person as its candidate, and it's trying to break out of a white-centered or blank-utopian vision of its politics. Whether that works itself out across the country to give them numbers is one issue, and also how much disaffected whiteness ends up voting and supporting that, because people are concerned that their agenda is no longer served inside the Democratic Alliance, inside other party formations, and end up going there. But I think the risk that any small party runs, and I agree with Professor Ndetiana that there is that issue of the leadership, but it's also the question of structures. If a smaller party does have structures, it can sustain itself through those structures. But if you simply have those personality cults and you don't have the structures to sustain it, it's very difficult to continue to build support on the ground. And so come election, when you go back to people, if the structures weren't present and you didn't have visibility throughout those 5 years, people go, where have you come from? You disappeared after 5 years. And the bigger players have a certain amount of, shall we say, largesse that they can spend on being visible and present long before you arrive. And that, I think, has been the hampering of some of the political parties on the smaller scale, that they don't have the money, they don't have the resources, and they don't have the structures.
If memory serves, in fact, since the last election, the Freedom Front Plus has been able to change its leader and hasn't suffered as a result. It's been able to perform that.
And because it speaks to a particular constituency, and there's a certain kind of focused, loyal identity around this. This election, they've chosen to break out of that identity at the same time as having a slogan that says, fight back, Slaan terug. And the question is, to what extent will that broadening and that narrowing and this kind of old-style politics that sounds like it's from 1994, 25 years later, to what extent will that appeal to people? And it does. That kind of retro or regressive vision of politics in South Africa does appeal to some people.
All right, I understand that in the next little while we might actually get some kind of briefing, some kind of update. We'll get you details of that. In about 9 minutes or so, we're expecting one of the commissioners of the Electoral Commission to come and speak. In fact, all of them, in fact. We have an announcement coming through the hall here. I think you'll be able to hear it. We'll go to the podium now and see what's being said there.
The Electoral Commission has an update to make. If you may please come closer to the where we normally meet. So 11:30 we'll have an update. Thank you.
So the news there at 11:30 we will have that update. So there will be that official briefing. You will see it here on SABC2 and on the SABC News channel. Let's just pick up on this issue around smaller parties, possibly because we might not see some of them for some time after this. Professor Untitled, do you think these sorts of parties are going to always be with us? And let me explain why I asked that question, because we seem to have a flourishing of new parties, or maybe at least a germination of new parties at the moment. I mean, we have the ZA, the South African Capitalist Party, we have Taxi Party, we have ATM, we have lots of other parties, ACM, that seem to have come, not quite from nowhere, but almost nowhere in some ways, in the public perception at least. So you would think that maybe we're going to have a lot more voices and people have a lot more choice. And yet, the way you've been talking about parties that you call patronage parties, you suggest they're all doomed, they don't really have a future. So my question really, to sum it up, is to suggest, do you think we're always going to have parties like this that seem to rest on one leader?
Well, egos will never disappear, Stephen.
They're usually led by men, I notice.
Yeah, they're individuals with, inflated sense of self, really. Because the Party for Capitalism, for instance, right? If that fellow really believed in capitalism, the DA speaks to capitalism to some degree, so it would make sense to join the DA. Hlaudi Motsoeneng, who used to be very prominent in this institution, thinks that he has something to offer, and you listen to him. He is completely incoherent. Right? And for some reason, he believes that he can be, actually it does say that he can make the best president, right? So you have individuals like that, and these are comical figures, these are clowns, right? So for some reason, though, they still manage to get money to register. So you will have, there are parties at times that are formed out a very strong gripe. They speak to a particular constituency. Yes, the EFF is largely a patron-based party, but they're also formed around a particular ideology. They're pushing populism quite strong, and they have a constituency that they are targeting. So for them, that explains why they've managed to grow, right? But by and large, I mean, some of these folks, ATA, Taxi Association, what exactly are they bringing that's different from the rest of the parties? So my point is ultimately, Stephen, as long as you have egos, you'll always have new parties.
Do you think that the parties we have are different from in other places? I mean, India, for example, a country quite similar to us in many ways, has many parties like this, often centered around an actor or an actress.
There are those, and even in Western democracies, I mean, British politics is full of very odd parties that you often can't tell if people are being parodied or if the system is being parodied. And sometimes the parody becomes a real political figure and force. Let's not forget, the most powerful industrial military complex in the world is, headed by somebody that many people dismissed as a clown who could never possibly get in, and made remarks about the orange, fake suntan. But in the United Kingdom, somebody like Nigel Farage was dismissed as hilarious and a marginal figure, and has now become somebody that actually has shifted political discourse in the country. In South Africa, we haven't yet entered that space. We almost got into that space in some respects. But there's also a tradition of parties that have a long history in South Africa's liberation struggle, who are now in the process of exiting the electoral process. So the Azanian People's Organization was the first to do so in 2014. People have questions about whether the Pan-Africanist People's Congress will continue to exist in Parliament. So there are those formations which are different from new formations. And some of them are, I agree with you, ego-driven, but some of them are also opportunistic. I maintain that if you can get enough people to give you a seat in Parliament, it's a very nice income. It's 1.2 million, there's nice housing in Cape Town for when Parliament is in session, there are all sorts of perks attached to it, and you have 5 years of employment based on having sold a Wizard of Oz style, man behind the green curtain, don't pay attention to him, dream. And I think it's, for me, there's a distinction between people who have principles that may be quixotic and may go nowhere, and people who actually are using the system in order to enrich themselves and use this in order to gain a certain kind of prominence. That said, I think my last remark on this is every election has these parties. If we go back to 1994, there was the Federal Party of Francis Kendall, there was the Soccer Party, there was the Dacha Party, there was the KISS Party. None of those parties went anywhere, and I think that was because these people saw a chance, it didn't work out, and they've disappeared.
In fact, I think former President Kgalema Motlanthe expressed sorrow today while he was voting at the demise of the Keep It Straight and Simple party. For some reason, KISS is a party name that everyone remembers. All right, just to update you, a couple of minutes now away from the first sort of briefing of the night after voting is finished. Now, I can't guarantee that we are going to actually get results from them yet. I suspect what we might get is an update on how the voting went. In other words, we might get official confirmation that voting has now finished. I'm told it's about 4 or 5 minutes away before we finish, before we actually start to get that briefing. It'll be the CEO and the commissioners of the Electoral Commission who will brief you. You'll see that live, and we'll take our analysts by the hand if we have to down to the floor, and we'll be able to watch and take questions from that situation there. So we'll be doing that. You'll have lots of live coverage here as we go through the evening. All right, Professor Mdletshe, we've got a few minutes before we get that briefing. We hope it'll be about results. I think it's probably too soon, but I was born an optimist. When we have a situation like this, I mean, you've got the Electoral Commission, you've got this constant desire for information. It's quite important to fill it. If you don't fill it, you have a vacuum, and that actually allows all sorts of other things to happen.
People start speculating. Social media is good. It gets people to communicate, people from distant places to add their observations, so we get to know about things that would otherwise not have known. But at the same time, the information can be fabricated. This is a political process. There's a lot of manipulation, right? So if they leave certain things unchallenged, then those things become reality. I mean, we've just been talking now about the possibility of people voting twice. Angela is quite adamant that you can't vote twice, but I didn't get the commissioners refuting that point. Right? So I'm not convinced that you possibly can't. So perhaps they might have to reiterate that point and say, well, you can't. So they need to constantly give us information because we are picking up things. We are a very conversational society. We are in the process of, in the midst of an election, we are waiting for an outcome. So we are speculating, so they need to come up with some information to put us at ease.
I suppose, Angelo, I mean, information abhors a vacuum in some ways, but you also have a situation where you have expectations that can be created, and then when the actual results come, those expectations are dashed. It can be important to manage expectations so that you don't have any negative consequences.
And part of the managing of those expectations is a certain kind of critical education and political education. So the idea of instant gratification taking too long, that has to end. And I think also we need to recognize that these things take time. The other thing that I think one has to say about social media is that as problematic as the notion of a public sphere was in the 18th century, the idea that social media is a public sphere is deeply problematic because there are particular people who have the conversation there and participate in the conversation, and we can't take that as representative of everybody, partly because of saturation of smartphones and partly because of the silent majority who sit back and don't get involved. So you're likely to see forms of extreme outlier opinions exchanged there. I agree with Professor Mdletshe that a lot of that could be manufactured, but a lot of it is also information that isn't meaningful. It's almost as if you have a Baudrillard vision. You will have a future, he said, in the late 70s in which you have more and more information and less meaning. With all this information out there, people don't know how to make meaningful sense of it. Even somebody like me who sits here and is currently talking is filling the gap with information that could potentially not be meaningful. Until we hear from the IEC what it is that they're going to tell us, speculating is meaningless. And I think it's important for us to remind ourselves when it is we're filling airtime and when it is we're engaging in full, meaningful analysis. And right now, until the IEC tells us what it is that they're going to give us, speculating, wondering, and anticipating, which is what millions of South Africans are doing, is a natural thing to do. But we must not let it get away from us and turn our speculations and our concerns and our uncertainty into information. And that, I think, is a crucial thing for South Africans to bear in mind over the next 72 hours. Our uncertainties are valid and we should certainly use them, but they're not information.
All right. Angelo, thank you very much indeed. Professor Mgobisi and Tatiana, I'm not going to release you both just yet, I'm afraid. You're stuck here with me until 1 o'clock. Okay, we're going to go live now to the podium. This is the main stage of the Electoral Commission, and we are expecting an announcement now. I understand that it is the commissioners of the Electoral Commission and the CEO of the Electoral Commission who are going to be briefing us. We are just waiting for them to take their spaces. I imagine the first voice you hear is probably going to be Kate Papela, the national spokesperson of the IEC. She was the person who made the announcement 10 minutes ago that there would be a briefing. So I'm expecting that it will be she who speaks first and is the voice that you will hear. So that is what is happening here at the Electoral Commission. I can see on screens and I can sort of turn in one direction and I can start to see what is beginning to happen. You can see a large number of people preparing for that press conference. Of course, one of the things that's happening is a large number of journalists are getting ready as well. It looks like they're about to start.
Welcome to another briefing from the Electoral Commission. I'm going to allow Commissioner Miepja to come and read the statement. Then we'll take it from there. Ndate Msutu?
Thank you, Mebapela. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Good evening, South Africa. In the light of serious allegations regarding 2 potential instances of double voting, the Electoral Commission would like to assure voters and all stakeholders of the overall integrity of the electoral process. 2 separate instances have been brought to the attention of the Electoral Commission over the past few hours, in which it is alleged voters were able to cast more than 1 vote at different voting stations. Fortunately, the election process contains a number of checks and safeguards which together serve to protect the integrity of the process. The layers of security include: 1, the voters' roll, which only allows registered voters to vote and only allows for a single registration per voter. 2, the requirement for voters to produce a valid ID document before they vote. 3, the scanning of ID documents prior to voting. 4, the marking of a voter's stamp with ink. May I say indelible ink. 5, the completion of a form containing the details of voters and the signing of a sworn declaration by voters where they vote at a voting station at which they are not registered. 6, party agents and observers monitoring all aspects of the voting, the counting, and the results capturing processes. 7, an inbuilt system-based exception report or reporting process for which various tolerance levels have been set. These exception reports are very well known to all of our political parties and the media as we provide these reports. And lastly, we capture these results and keep them on our systems in a scanned format where they can be recalled individually. All of these leave a detailed footprint of voter participation in the process and can be used both separately and in combination to identify instances of electoral fraud. As part of the process of finalizing the results of the elections, the Commission will assess data from scanners, VEC forms. These are forms used when voters vote outside of their voting districts, and the voters' roll to identify any potential risks. Where evidence is found to support electoral fraud, the Electoral Commission will firstly quarantine the results of the affected voting districts, and secondly, will pursue criminal charges against the perpetrators, who will be very well known to us. We have indicated that they would have left footprints with us, and we will pursue those footprints. The electoral process also allows for objections to be raised by political parties throughout the process. This includes instances where they believe a voter was ineligible to vote or has voted more than once. The Electoral Commission appeals to any party or person who may have evidence of any electoral fraud or significant irregularity to report this immediately so that it can be thoroughly investigated. The Electoral Commission will not allow the potential misconduct of one or two individuals, be they voters or election officials, to taint the overall outcome of these elections. The integrity of the results is paramount to the credibility of all elections, and the election results are only finally captured and displayed in the result system where the Commission is satisfied in the integrity of these results. I thank you.
Thank you so much, Commissioner Muepya. I'll open the floor for questions, for clarity, and then we'll be wrapping up the evening's proceedings. As you may know that our officials are on the ground preparing to count. Some are still assisting voters. So we're going to keep this press briefing as short as possible. I've got two questions from the back.
Thank you, Kenangedi.
Yes,
it's Isak du Plessis, RSG from the SABC. You mentioned a few procedures that you have in place for security, and in many instances, most of those security measures have been broken. The mark on the nail could be washed off. There are scanners that was not working at various places. People, like you also said, that voted twice, things like that. If you get broken security measures like that in various instances, how can it be trusted?
Thank you. I will build on Isak's question, and the question is as follows. 7 issues were listed which would make us feel secure about our system. But everybody knows that basically it's down to the ink, because it was stated at the 5 o'clock press briefing that actually the zip machines are only used internally in every voting station. We all know that the voting roll is only for that voting station, etc., etc. The ID book and the ID card can no longer each have a sticker in it because the ID card cannot carry the sticker, etc. The whole integrity of this election hinges on the point whether people can vote twice or not. We all know that the number of people is much higher than 2. We also know that there's even an MP here who will show you that that ink is not indelible. It is not indelible. It's no longer there. So, are you being straight with us? And is there a way to audit? This is the first time I've covered 8 elections which we've had this kind of problem on this kind of scale, and where we've had a press conference specifically called for this purpose. Is there a way, differently from the past, to audit the results so that they are credible and our democratic process is safe?
There's a hand at the back. I've got last 2 in front.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I'm Dr. Sipo Klipu from CPM. My question is, when are we gonna go digital? We're living in a digital environment, in a paperless situation. It is very clear that the current manual system we're using is not credible at all. When are we gonna go digital?
We're 2 in front.
Good evening. My name is Natasha from the SABC. Ma'am Kate, I just want to know, is IEC not worried about some IEC officials who seem to be ignorant of, voting procedures? I mean, you have so many cases where people were told to take off their fake nails. Just some clarity on that, please.
Okay. Good evening. My name is Clement Manyatela from Eyewitness News. I wanted to ask about, at what point do you pick up the discrepancy? And you mentioned that you would have to do an investigation. There are layers of other security measures. How impactful is that going to be on the announcements of the results? When you pick up that discrepancy and you investigate, will that impact on the announcement? Could we see the announcement of the result being later as a result of the investigations? Thank you.
Sophie Mkwena from the SABC. I was at Morningside this morning at a voting station. Officials were quite confused. At some point in time, they didn't give voters those stickers. And when they went inside, some officials were questioning whether they can come in and cast their ballots. Was there proper training for officials? Because as a country, we were fully aware that a lot is at stake in terms of these elections.
Right, thank you. Let me allow Commissioner Mepja.
Thank you very much. I think we must say, as a nation, we have come this far because we have prized integrity of results above anything else. We have put those systems in place. They have transparency. We have invested significantly in the systems. Political parties, yourselves in the media, know that. What the situation today, or the allegations that we have brought to our attention, and you will appreciate that the entire commission, our executives are here. We are going to deal with these things because we view them seriously. It cannot be that with all of the measures that we have given to you and said to you, this is how the systems are going to work, there will be anything hidden away from you. I think for us, that's a point of departure. We've never been here before. It is possible that something has happened. We are saying we will pursue every one of those instances that have been brought to our attention. But let me deal with the issues you raised substantively. You say, are most of the security measures broken? We don't know. We have allegations. We have put them before you. We said they have been brought to our attention. We have received them, and we are not hiding them. We are pursuing them. We will go through these allegations because they are specific, will allow us to go through the layer of security measures that we have to see which of those have been breached and to see how they have been breached, because when we know, we will know how they have been breached. And we will share that with you. So you will know about this. We are saying these measures, some of them work individually, others work in combination. And that we will also be able to say and share with you. Yan, you raised a question about the smart card ID. Yes, it's true. Smart card ID, you don't affix anything to it. But there are other measures, as we have indicated. And these situations that we have already give us ideas about what the future could look like. We are already thinking the future. But this is what we are saying. It is not the whole integrity that has been put at risk. We will say these are the specific measures that we need to look at. So we will be able to say to you, we'll stand here, we'll face you, and we'll deal with that. Are we going to hide? I've already indicated there is no hiding place. In fact, we prefer it that way. We prefer that our nation, that the world at large would know, how confident we are or what it is that we are dealing with. Dr. Sipo, you say, when are we going digital? We at the Commission do a horizon scan very regularly. The last horizon scan we undertook, looking at a plethora of digital platforms, how they work. We did that and shared that with our nation and the international community. We had a huge international conference in this country where we presented a research report and said, these are the options that are available to us. We consulted with stakeholders in civil society, with political parties, with parliament. And at that point, South Africans were unanimous that given where those options place or rest in the world, we are better off with where we are. We need to look at them at another point. That's exactly what we have done. So it's not technology for the sake of it. There are countries that have adopted technology and they have reversed because there have been challenges with that. Ours is a process of being careful, of understanding what challenges we are facing and dealing with those challenges without looking back. Natasha says, is the IEC not worried? You said we're not worried about? Sorry? No, it's Sophie. I'll come to Natasha. I think you've got to look. I've captured it halfway through.
That our officials are ignorant.
Oh yes, that our officials are ignorant. I think the instances that we are dealing with will also help us to find out where, if any, there has been complacency. And we are saying we will not be able to hide that. And let me give a ridiculous example. If you say someone has come to a voting station, they were not registered as a voter, but they voted, it would have taken party agents of different political parties. It would have taken all of our officials. It would have taken all of the observers to do that. We'll be able to point that out and say, this is what happened. It then means the following thing. So we are saying we're not shy. We will look at those issues. Clement, you're saying, at what point do we pick up discrepancies? And this is the heart of the matter. Every step in the electoral process every critical step has a point at which we pause and reassure progress up to that point. In the instances that have been brought to our attention, we are already clear that we will pick up if there are any irregularities even before the results get to be processed. But to the extent that a result appears to be all right or good, there's nothing, there are other measures we can look at, and if we find that there is a problem, for example, the inbuilt exception reports, you know them as journalists because we share them with you. You will see them on our reports. When the results come here, your reports that you're looking at will say, so many results have been received by the Electoral Commission from voting stations. X amount of them have been captured. Of those that have been captured, Y amount has been audited. Of those that have been audited, Z amount have exceptions. And the rest are clean. The clean ones will end up on the screen. The ones that have exceptions are the ones that we will look at and we will go and cause them to be investigated to the extent that they need to be investigated. This is not new. We have always done it. And we are not going to shy away from it on this instance. In this instance, we will do that again. So I'm saying to you, there are points throughout the electoral process where we will pick these exceptions, and they will be transparent to you what those exceptions are. Ms. Sophie, you say stickers, given or not given, officials not being sure. The Chief Electoral Officer often says, you know, when you deal with human beings, there will be aberrations. They are not supposed to be the norm. We deal with exceptions. We train staff. They have competencies that they've got to show they have mastered. And there's a level, the certain level of proficiency we have to be happy with. Once they've gone through that, we then, you know, conclude a contract with them. Yes, it is so, or it could have been so, that some people in that instance that you say, you know, you witnessed it, I didn't, but let me say it happened, and it's very possible it happens. What happens when a voter approaches a voting station and they scan? That slip is not about them having voted. Let's clarify that, because in part of the confusion we're trying to clarify, it's in the instance that that slip might have been printed once or somebody has not been handed. That slip is to help facilitate the person marking off the voter's roll to say, voter so-and-so, Mosotho Moepia, on this segment of the voter's roll in this station is voter number 791. So you don't have to go the whole page and another page and another page. You go straight to 791 because they've already been located by that. That's really what it does. Facilitates the queue, tells us what time you came in there, leaves a record for us to check if we want to reconcile data we have on the zip with the data we have on the voters' roll that we have crossed. Those are the measures that we have indicated we deal with. In the event that I have omitted something, I'm sure my colleagues will help.
Ladies and gentlemen, this brings to the end the briefing for now. We have to, CO, anything you want to deal with? Okay. CO wants to clarify something. Let's hear.
Thank you very much, Kate. I think I'm sure my colleagues are ready that with that explanation out of the way, we are. Yeah. Yeah, we'll check out about it. I'm not quite following it. Yep.
I think Kelebetsu Hirana, Babo for Artlet. I never until I. We read the results take time.
Okay.
You guys ready?
We're now going to get all the results.
Okay. All right. No, thank you very much, and thanks for indulging us. Now, with the explanation out of the way, we were beginning the process of projecting the results, and the results that you'll see here are clean. They're clean, verified, with no exceptions. There we go. You can see it's clean. Quite clean. And it's not okay, that's the VD, there it is. Is from the name of the voting station, Vomvo Lodge. That's the VD in relation to the ward. Now we are in suspense. Eh? Even I am in suspense. Yeah, I think.
Can I get that piece of paper so that we don't leave it there?
She's walking around.
They're saying that we must give it 5. Did you see their
5 seconds, 5 minutes.
5 seconds. It's coming through.
1, 2, 3, 4.
Okay.
Melanie is killing us now.
You're live now with that briefing from the IEC, and here we are. We're waiting for the first results of this election. It looks like we have the first results. In fact, it is from Umzimvubu. It is a part of the Eastern Cape, also known as Mount Aleph. And from what I can see on the maps, now this is interesting. We're expecting the sort of official announcement of the result. We've been officially told where it is, and then there is a picture of the ANC logo on the map. So I'm presuming that that means that it's gone to the ANC. And if you can see me sort of looking above your head, it's because I'm looking at that map. In fact, maybe we can swing round and have a look at it and sort of do that and see the map, and we can see what we're actually looking at. It's a very interesting thing to look at. So let's just do that, and you can see that what is actually happening is this graphic that's been put up by the Electoral Commission. Let's speak for a moment, and we do need to actually say goodbye to you on SABC 2. It might be staying for some of the briefing just to see what comes next from the Electoral Commission. But with me here is Professor Mcebisi Ntletyana. Professor, I suppose in the Eastern Cape, we're not surprised if the ANC would take the first results from there.
As ANC country, rural areas, ANC is very dominant there, so this is not a surprise at all. I don't think the ANC even deserves or has to celebrate. It was always expected.
All right. I'm being told that SABC 2 viewers, in fact, will be with us until 4 a.m. or so there will be more information coming through for you on that channel. And, of course, stay with us here on the SABC News channel as well. We are expecting more results. I mean, you would expect that clearly this is a very small polling station. I mean, not a lot of people would have voted.
Well, the interesting thing about this, Stephen, is that at least we have the first results. That's historical, right? Umzimvubu are written into history.
Well, someone somewhere is probably having a party. In fact, they're probably asleep, and the rest of us are discussing their results. So obviously what you also would like to hope, I mean, what we have, and Simon Mabolo, the Chief Electoral Officer, was very clear to use the word clean. He said, these are clean results. They've checked, and rechecked. This is becoming a small issue, let me put it like that for the moment, and see how it moves. But quite a strong riposte, I thought, from the Electoral Commission to its detractors through the day who've been making comments about the integrity of its processes.
I think they had to be quite emphatic on that. The question was raised repeatedly in the afternoon, and for some reason the CEO, Chief Electoral Officer, Simon Mabolo, did not address it directly and thoroughly. And they must have noticed that. And also you have this thing making the rounds in social media. And it's quite good that you had Musotu here, Miepe, right? Former...
There we go. We're going to take this result. This is Simon Mabolo's voice.
24. And you can see for yourselves there who is the leading party. You want me to say it? No, let's leave them for the benefit of your eyes and not for the benefit of your ears. Okay, thank you very much. That's your first result. And so on, it will now roll. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much, ladies and gentlemen.
Well, the result there, and what you have, if you look at it, and I know Simon Mabolo didn't want to say it for various reasons, but you can see the ANC, this is a polling station, Professor, 24 votes cast, 11 of them went to the ANC, 8 went to the Economic Freedom Fighters, 1 went to the Pan-Africanist Congress, and 2 went to the UDM. I think on my maths it adds to about 24. The EFF will be quite pleased with that.
There will be 8 votes. It's not bad. It's not bad, especially for a place that looks like it could be a rural place. The EFF is, I don't know, it's there at least, whether it's making inroads into rural areas. We can't be that conclusive, but it's somewhere there.
I mean, it's very tempting for people like you and I to immediately jump to conclusions and all of that. I suppose we should inject a slightly boring note of caution and just remind everyone that, in fact, it's way too soon to make any kind of prediction. Even the good people from the CSIR won't be doing that.
Well, the party agent, ANC party agent who delivered this victory, will be praising himself, and he should be congratulated. At least the party won, yeah.
One of the things in a process like this is that once it starts, it can speed up quite quickly. And the point I'm trying to make is that it's been, maybe a wait of, say, 3 hours for the first result. 9 o'clock is when polling would have finished. They would have had to wait there. And now they're actually getting going. And so we would like to think that the results will actually now start to come in.
They will, Stephen. In fact, the CSIR fellow was telling us earlier that by 4 a.m., 5 later on this morning, they would know. They might just call them. So, yeah, the gates have opened.
Professor Ntletyana, if I could ask, if I could just speak to the Deputy Secretary General of the African National Congress, Jesse Duarte. Jesse, good evening to you. It's been quite a little while. Let me just give you those results again in case you missed them. The ANC winning the first results that have been announced in this election. And, of course, it's in Mount Aleph, Umzimvubu. 24 votes cast. The ANC winning 11, the EFF 8. And then we've got 2 votes for the UDM and 1 for the PAC. Jesse Duarte, good evening to you.
Good evening to you, too.
And may I say congratulations on winning the first result.
Thank you. I think this is just the opening of the door. We're very happy that we won this VD. It is in a stronghold of the ANC in Elfenzo region, so you know it's expected. But let's wait for tomorrow, and we're going to wait very patiently. But thank you very much, and we'd like to thank the voters in Mount Elif for giving the ANC back their confidence for now, and we'll see what happens tomorrow.
I mean, obviously there's a lot more to come. Turnout is crucial. I know that the ANC, you have a very professional turnout operation. How did it run today?
It went well. Actually better than we expected. And we believe that South Africans came out in their millions to vote. Hopefully we'll see the results of that in terms of percentages. We were very impressed with Soweto, Tembisa. We were also very impressed with eThekwini. And also various parts of Limpopo, as well as the Eastern Cape. So it looks like people came out to vote. And we're not going to guess a percentage, but you know, our statistics are quite accurate. It looks like between 69 to 70% turnout. But let's see what the experts say tomorrow morning.
All right, just a hunch. I mean, you talk about Soweto, you talk about Tembisa high turnouts. That will give you a strong chance of keeping Gauteng, if that's the case?
We think we will keep Gauteng. We're not going to make pronouncements. Let's wait. I mean, you know, we're patient. We're patient. We're waiting for the count. But we think we did fairly well.
Jessie Duarte, thank you very much indeed, the Deputy Secretary General of the ANC. I'm joined now by the National Spokesperson for the Economic Freedom Fighters, Dr. Mbuyiseni Ndlozi. Dr. Ndlozi, good evening.
Good evening, Stephen, and to the listeners and viewers at home.
So you actually took the ANC quite close in a way, the Eastern Cape, the Mount Elif, that Mzimvovo area. But Jessie Duarte, you heard her just say a moment ago, it's an ANC stronghold. They got 11 votes, you got 8.
Well, first of all, I want to thank our people for having given us confidence by voting for the EFF in the Eastern Cape in Mzimvovo. It's really a vote that we don't take lightly. There are no strongholds anymore. That's not a word that can be associated anymore with South Africa's democratic politics, and that's because of the presence of the economic freedom fighters. I think it's going to be a neck-to-neck like that. We're taking them on. Every street, every VD, every ward, every region and every province, we're taking them on like that. But most importantly, we thank the people of South Africa, particularly those 11 voters there in Mzimvobo, for giving it to the EFF.
All right, lots of conversations around turnout. Does a high turnout help you or hurt you? I mean, various people have various views on this. Some of the political sort of analysts I've spoken to, some of the people who are much better at maths than I am, suggest that, you know, a high turnout helps a governing party. Some people say it actually goes the other way. How do you see it?
I don't know that there is supporting evidence for this conceptualization, because the average turnout of votes in South Africa is 74, 73, 71 in the past 6 elections, at least national and provincial elections. And then 2016, the turnout was 58%, and in the local government elections before that, it was 55%. It didn't work for the ANC. I'm not sure where that theory comes from. It could be one of those either media incompetence in properly conceptualizing issues in public discourse, or just ANC propaganda. 71, 72, 73% is an average turnout. We haven't been in an 86% that was in 1994. And if you go there, the ANC didn't have about 2 provinces. So I'm not sure where that theory comes from. What I do understand is that the full force of South Africans came out, and that is good for democracy. That is good for the type of neck-to-neck that we are going to eat a lot, particularly in areas like rural Eastern Cape, rural KwaZulu-Natal. We've a stronghold, and we've entered that space. There's no stronghold for the ANC anymore. Those days are gone.
And then there's been a few questions around the integrity of the process, quite a strong response to that from the Electoral Commission. For the moment, are you satisfied? Obviously, you're still waiting for all your party agents to report back. You've got to wait for the counting to finish. For the moment, are you happy?
Look, I think that there is firstly a very worrying issue that the IEC has been extremely taking it lightly, that there was blatant racism in the Western Cape voting station Winelands, which is very clear, and the ways in which they responded to that doesn't inspire confidence. That you could accept the coincidence that all white voters were not registered in that voting station, all black voters were registered in that voting station. They should zoom in, deal decisively with racial discrimination, not at this hour of South Africa's democratic life. That's the first important point, because we're not comfortable with racism. Black people should be able to freely move anywhere in South Africa. The second part is a rather laissez-faire attitude to this question of double voting, and the fact that there's not been a tight control of movements of people across provinces, across VDs, and they're in denial about the fact that their ink is removable. And I think that although it didn't happen at a large scale, it would inspire confidence for them to accept the responsibility and come out very clearly how they are going to deal with those irregularities. They are not doing that, and I think that it's going to backfire sooner or later.
Dr. Mbiseni and Lozi, thank you very much indeed. Do appreciate it. National spokesperson for the Economic Freedom Fighters. All right, we'll bring you the latest from here. We've got Professor Mcebisi and Tletiana as well. For the moment, though, let's go back to Tsepiso and Griselda in our Johannesburg studios.
Thanks a lot, Stephen. So you hear that the first voting district has been declared in your home area.
Oh, absolutely. Always been an ANC stronghold, so I don't think there's a surprise there. But I see one vote going to ATM. And we know that the ATM in certain parts of the Eastern Cape, but what we have been seeing during the period of campaigning, that they seem to have been making somewhat
some inroads, yes.
Yeah.
Predictions are that they are definitely going to capture some of the support of the traditional parties. We'll see whom that is. Of course, as and when those results come in, we are live at the Results Operations Center at here. We're looking at it from the perspective of social media. Our reporters are all across the country.
We do not just speak, we let every voice in our nation find full expression in language and in culture. We do not just teach, we empower all people with education. We do not just bring you the news, we place you where the news is happening. We do not just entertain, we take you on journeys. We do not just broadcast sport, we create an arena for sporting heroes to inspire you. Ours is not just a job, it's a calling to ensure that everyone in our nation is informed, educated, and entertained. We're able to do this because you do your part. SABC TV licenses, it's all made possible by you.
Legal hassles?
Clientele legal.
That's it. We lost. Problems with the neighbors?
Clientele legal.
Rental disputes? Advice on maintenance matters? Drawing up a will? Clientele Legal will speak up for you.
Clientele Legal not only solved my labor matter, but also restored my confidence, and I walked out there feeling bigger than when I walked in.
It's definitely a value for money. I didn't pay a cent. My monthly premiums covered everything.
Take it or leave it.
Labor issues?
Clientele Legal. This is unacceptable. I have rights.
Problems with a mechanic?
Clientele Legal.
You need a lawyer. Professional lawyers, professional advice at an affordable price. SMS rights to 32281 and we'll call you back. SMS now.
Welcome to SABC News. If you have just tuned in, you're watching The Full View. We're giving you the eye on elections, specifically what's been trending on social media. I'm not alone. I am joined in studio by social media expert Yavu Madai. We have been doing so throughout the course of the week, keeping an eye on elections. Well, firstly, we also saw very excited first-time voters today. We've been having a look at some of the tweets and pictures that have been coming through on that.
So there was quite a few actually, and parents with their old enough kids going out to go and vote as a family. Lots of people kind of, because one of the key issues in the lead up to this elections was the youth and the fact that the youth were not voting. So it's so beautiful to see, right?
Yeah, definitely. As she came out there with her mom and what also seems to be her sister. And there was another tweet also coming through with regards to the thumbprint that we're seeing. This is currently a beauty queen. I'm not sure if she is the current or former Miss Teen South Africa. Yeah, Katlego says, first-time voter. It's 2019. I'm 19 years old, and today I got to exercise a right that millions fought for. I'm taking the opportunity as a young person for my voice to matter too, because this is my country. Well, more surprisingly, specifically amongst the youth, we also saw that trend yesterday with many people also saying they weren't sure who they would be voting for.
I want to vote, and it caused quite a stir on Twitter, and it was linked to this in some way, but it was definitely about the fact that people were unsure, especially from a youth demographic perspective. So it was good to be able to see this as a follow-up to that yesterday, because this showed that people did come out.
Yeah, definitely. So this one comes in from Miss Orchids on Twitter. 1 hour from the front, guys, and I don't know who I'm voting for. In 1994, I can only imagine black people knew where their votes were going. Hashtag SA elections. This goes back to the poll that we had yesterday with many young people saying that they were undecided.
And it wasn't even just young people. I mean, look at that.
Talk about confusing the enemies.
If that isn't a walking meme. But the undecided vote played out in so many different ways today, especially from a youth perspective. So hopefully, in and amongst the IEC briefing and all of the drama that is unfolding at the moment at the Rock, hopefully post-mortem, when the political parties do their post-mortem of this campaign in the lead up to the local government in the next year or two, please take note of why people are undecided. I think that becomes critical for political parties. Why were people undecided? They should have known, right?
I'm not sure only Twitter would know, but we've also been talking about the world's eye on elections, not only here in South Africa, but what the world is seeing out there with regards to our elections. And we've drawn up some newspaper posts that we've actually seen on what it looks like from the outside view.
So this is the New York Times, who, and we can't necessarily see the headline, but it says basically that President Ramaphosa has a lot he's got a lot to live up to post these elections today. He's got basically he's being tested. I can't remember the exact words, but effectively that is what the New York Times was reporting on today. So it's the global view of what is happening in South Africa and their view on it.
All right. This one also coming in from another news. Yeah, BBC that is. South Africa election polls close in test for the ANC.
So the world view, and you'll see another one come up as well just now, is that the view is that the ANC is definitely under pressure. The ANC is definitely being tested, and what happens today, or technically yesterday, is going to be determined. It's for once we are sitting on a knife edge, not necessarily in terms of majority, but in terms of what has been lost. There we go, South Africans vote. So this is a Nigerian online magazine, so to speak, a publication, Punch, that says South Africans vote in test for ruling ANC. So it seems to be the common thread from a global eye on our elections.
Yeah, definitely. And just before we wrap this up, just moments ago, the IEC had released their first results. They were also doing a press media briefing with regards to some of the allegations and discrepancies that had been brought up. In fact, yesterday, it's already Thursday morning, with regards to the voting, with regards to the procedures and the protocols. So let's have a look look at some of the ones that have been coming through. The one at the top says they will be investigated to the point that they will need to be investigated. Still not answering. I'll ask again, what happens after the investigations?
So this was in relation to, and you tweeted about it, this was in relation to the issues around people double voting and how many exactly. So he responded by saying they will obviously will be audited and investigated, and that was the response from someone. There was also a major, there was a question about digital. You know, why have we not gone digital? And it was a very leading kind of question, but also a very overarching question, which created, and I'm sure if we go back to it now, you and I, we'll find that there's a whole lot of discussion around going digital. And going digital doesn't mean you're going to be voting from your house, you know. It means what are the processes involved and the technology being used.
Now, the IEC Commissioner had hosted the briefing just a couple of moments ago, and this just seems to be some of the comments on that. This IEC briefing and this guy doesn't sound convincing at all. How the IEC South Africa can actually deal with this double voting by peeps. They don't have a plan to deal with this. Wow, people can actually vote twice. And then another one that we saw with regards to the ink. People have also been complaining.
Apparently it's removable ink. It can be removed. So this double voting has a problem on so many levels. It's not just the scanning of the ID. It's not just the ink. It's not just your name being struck off as you as you arrive and submit for voting. So there is a problem, and we're obviously going to see the story develop. You and I are going to have fun later on.
We definitely are. Well, of course, we will continue giving you hashtags on all the updates, everything to do with elections, both pre and post. Results are trickling in, so it's going to be very, very different tomorrow evening. Myself and Yavi will be back again, keeping you an update on the eye on elections. For now, though, it's over to Tsepiso.
Thanks a lot for that, Shante. As we're saying, it's rolling coverage hour to hour as those results come in at the Results Operations Center. Our colleagues are there on the floor looking at the leaderboard. Stephen Grootes unpacking some of those results that are coming in. As mentioned earlier on, the Umzimvubu district, the first to declare its results, the first voting district, 24 votes counted, and it seems that the majority of those going to the ANC, and it's a largely rural area in the northeastern parts of the Eastern Cape. So we will keep on giving you more details about the various populations, what some of the major issues emanating from those are. But now let's look at another hotspot area. That's Alexandria. You know that various political parties using it to campaign. It was at a boiling point in the run-up to the elections, marred by days of service delivery protests. Our reporter Maheketla Mohlabe has been monitoring the situation there all day, and he has actually been monitoring the situations from the very beginning when it started heating up. So today, did people turn out in their numbers?
In an embattled township that was marred by service delivery protests, you would have expected a different scene, but I can tell you that people came in numbers. They came in numbers because they want their voices heard. And this is exactly what they're telling us. They are saying that we are here to make our mark. This is the day we have been waiting for. Yes, we've protested. Yes, we have actually made those calls for officials to come on the ground to speak to us. Others did not come. Others came through. But this is our day to make our voice heard much clearer and louder.
And no incidents? No
incidents. In fact, we just left about a couple of minutes ago. It was quite normal. It was quite normal, as I mentioned, quite opposite to what we saw during the protest. And police, of course, they are there in their numbers to make sure that there's no violence. But you drive around the streets, I mean, the people are just dancing throughout the streets there, and to show that they are happy.
Did the polling stations open in time, therefore also closing on time?
Absolutely. Of course they did. They opened right at 7 a.m. and they closed at 9 p.m.
So that's what I want to talk to you about, Maheketla, that final countdown, the last 30 minutes. You had an extraordinary day. Take us through it.
So obviously we were at one of the polling stations there called Zion Ministries Church. this is where a lot of people came through to vote. But again, we were waiting, trying to get more answers. Suddenly we see this elderly person come through and he's complaining, shouting. But again, he's emotional. And I approached him, just trying to understand what exactly is the issue here. And he tells me, listen, I've got this paper. I think you'd recognize the paper. That's the paper that they give you after they scanned your ID. And then he says that this is the only paper I have. They are saying that I should go back home because I don't have my ID. I lost my ID. I went back. In fact, he was turned back twice. So he says that I went back home. I looked through my shack. I couldn't find anything.
And this is you driving,
yeah.
I understand, hurriedly to the Home Affairs officers in a bid to help him get a temporary ID. So tell us about that experience.
In fact, what you see in that picture, the first pictures that came through there were in an Uber. I had to actually call an Uber. I took it to myself because I felt the pain that this elderly person is actually going through. So I then decided to call an Uber, and then we then got onto the Uber, drove to the nearest Home Affairs in Alexandra. And of course, when we got there, the door, you obviously have to get those ID photos. And then those gentlemen outside there, they're talking about the fact that you need to have 8 rands to get this done. And then inside there, to get your temporary ID, you need 70 rand. That totals up to 150. I didn't have anything in my pocket, but obviously I had to make sacrifices and just request the gentleman outside to say, guys, give me 70 rands.
Mahiketa, so I want to look at this particular. So you made a plan, and this is what it ended up in, you guys running.
Yeah.
Towards that polling
this
station.
is exactly 9 p.m. The gentleman, the elderly person there, running, digging over the ropes that are actually holding the tent. And there he is. He's actually being well received at the entrance there. And as you can see, they are going through the normal procedure of actually scanning your ID. That's the temporary ID book that he managed to get at the Home Affairs. And of course, the IEC official there assisting. And there he is. He goes inside the tent. He is definitely the last person to vote there. So he almost missed that opportunity. He tells me he voted in 1994. There was no way he wanted to miss this opportunity of voting for the 6th time. So there he is. He's voting. And of course...
What moved you about this story, Mahiketla? What made you go beyond the call of duty? I tweeted on it saying, we salute you as a colleague, because obviously you're in the midst of working, but something must have made you push the limits.
What touched me most in this story is that this parent, I call him my parent, as we were raised to believe that every elderly person is our parent. To see a tear from an elderly person, and this person is saying that I want to cast my vote, but I'm being turned back. This is my only chance. I want to keep on voting. I don't want to have this streak of voting since 1994 broken. I felt the pain and I decided, listen, this is on me now. I need to take this opportunity. I need to make this happen for him.
And this is
there
him
he is, he's
thanking...
happy. And he's just cast his vote. Of course, it's through those 2 ballots into the national and provincial ballot boxes. And he's actually also explaining to the official to say that this almost never happened, and I don't know how I was going to cope. But of course, after this particular visual you saw there, I managed to get a sense of how he felt. And this is actually what he had to say. So you voted, you're happy?
Yes, I'm very happy. I made my say.
In fact, there's more after that. There's a clip that we cut of himself. We spoke to him outside the tent. I'm sure our colleagues may be able to play that for us.
All right, so while we wait for them to play for us that snippet of him expressing his elation. Did it bring home to you the importance of South Africans enjoying the democratic right to vote and choose who governs them?
More especially the elderly people, and I'm going to emphasize this, Tsebiso. He is 52 years old, and these are among those unsung heroes. He voted in 1994.
Okay,
We were still young
I
at that
believe
time.
that interview that you had him expressing how grateful he is to you we've got that visual, so let's go to it and listen.
I can't even speak.
Yeah.
I'm so happy I can't even speak. You know the way I'm so happy.
Yeah.
And the way you know what, you helped me. They couldn't help me there. So I thought maybe probably that was the end of me. And then, but then you took up to it up to you to go to all way, to try and help me. Yes, and then you did help me. So I'm very happy. I'm very happy.
Yeah.
I made my mark today.
You made your mark, and you probably want to see more delivery in your...
Yes, I probably want to see more service delivery in Alexandra, and not only in Alexandra, in other places where also in the whole country. Yes.
All right. Thank you, Bob.
And you were just about to express to us why it's important, especially for the elderly, to exercise their right to vote.
These are the people that were among those who were actually involved in the struggle years. And I feel that as young people, we have to honor these people. We have to honor the elderly people in the country. I felt as a young person that they paved a way for many of us to be where we are. They paved a way for us to enjoy the fruits of this democracy that we see today. Many of us voted today because of their contribution.
And when you say many of us, were there a lot of young people at the voting stations? The polling stations had been predicted to have very few young people in the queues, but you say that's not the picture you saw.
In fact, I saw a lot of young people in those queues, and of course, many of them first-time voters. And what they told me is that they want service delivery issues addressed in their community. That's the main thing that actually dominated the conversations that I had, including the elderly people in Alexandra. And as you recall, as you mentioned in the intro, this is about Alexandra that, according to them, seems to have been forgotten by officials. This is an Alexandra that should be prioritized, more especially this time of voting. This is an Alexandra that they feel that the mushrooming of those checks should be stopped. The illegal structure of those buildings should be stopped. I mean, it's a congested area. And of course, driving in Alexandra, I'm sure you have some time back, but you struggle to actually face the oncoming traffic. You have to wait on the other side to allow the car to pass by to be able to proceed with your journey. So that's the experience that actually experiencing there. That's the situation that's there. And of course, driving out of Alexandra, what we saw, a lot of rats in the road. And that actually explains the story that they are actually experiencing in Alexandra as a whole.
Thank you very much, Mareketla Mohlabe. Really putting into question some of those predictions about a depressed youth vote. And it's a story that I've been hearing from quite a number of people that, contrary to the fact that there were expectations that young people wouldn't come out in their numbers, that picture may be different. Well, let's find out where they tabulate all of that information. Griselda?
Thank you very much, Tshepiso and Mareketla. Now, some election observers expressed concern today at an apparent low youth turnout at the polls. Now, this as many political parties had targeted young and first-time voters. Reporter Refule Mofokeng spoke to some youthful voters.
I'm just overwhelmed with joy because I'm going to vote for the first time.
Viola Tudlati is a first-year BCom student. The 20-year-old believes her vote will bring change.
As a young person, I'm hoping to see lives change, lives of young black people, hoping to see graduates get jobs, hoping to see improvement of lives of people who live in squatter camps, people who live in townships. I hope to see equality. I hope to see freedom, the freedom that our
Well, let's take a short break now. We'll have much more straight after this break, and we'll also take you back to Pretoria, where Stephen Curtis is, but shortly after this break.
On Trends Travel, we bring you a full guide on all things lifestyle related. With so much to discover, we give you comprehensive reviews of places to visit, music, travel, and food. We also explore the arts, whether on or off stage. All this and more, be sure to tune into Trends Travel, Saturdays at 5:30 p.m.
We've seen that Brent crude oil rise about 30% this year alone.
Brent crude that's going steadily firmer speaks to a global economy that's in good shape. What we don't want to see are supply interruptions or sudden spikes.
The Bank of Athens has become GrowBank. It plans to be a bank using digital and personable relations with its customers in the agricultural and food value chain space.
We're a lucky bank in that we are small. We're already working with artificial intelligence will allow us to manage our customer data.
Agriculture is a business. If we're going to take people, millions of them out of poverty, we've got to turn agriculture into a mega sector that works for everybody.
Solani Mkiva says that they believe that the king should be released and that they are not being opportunistic.
The last 4 years, we've been engaging with government. It cannot be a post-colonial government that begins to jail a king in a context of what actually happened.
Bobby Solomons, he's the spokesperson of the Alex Shutdown Committee, the multi-billion rand Alexander Renewal Project. Nothing came of that.
Community wants to know what really happened to the monies.
The creative director of the label, Mansu, that of course means black is beautiful in Sesotho. What has been your experience in that regard, given some of the more established labels that you have managed to work with?
It is hard. 15 years is a long time. There's a lot of sacrifice for your family to make for you.
This is the thing. This is it this morning.
All right, good evening. Welcome back to the National Results Centre, the Results Operations Centre here run by the Electoral Commission. We've got two people to speak to you in a moment, but first, just some more results. So you heard earlier the first results coming through a short while ago. It was from Umzimvubu in the Eastern Cape, previously known as Port Aleph, the ANC, taking the first results in the election. They won 11 votes, the EFF 8, and then other parties won the rest in that election. 24 votes count in that area. Now we've got some more results. If you just have a look here as I stand up, you can see that results are now beginning to come through. Now, this is a very small percentage of votes. So what you can see is that so far of the votes that are valid that have been cast in this election counted, tabulated, audited, and now published, you've got just over 26,500 votes have actually been counted and put into the system. 26,515 votes have actually been put into that system. 369 votes have been spoiled. A total of 26,884 votes have actually been cast. Voter turnout on that number is 57%. I imagine that number will change as we go through the night. So as I must just keep stressing, a very small percentage here of votes being cast. What we've seen so far is that the ANC is on 62.56%, the DA on 18.32%, and the EFF on 7%. There'll be a couple of pollsters who will be looking at these results, and they'll be feeling very confident of their chances of surviving this election with their reputations intact as they look at this. But just to stress once more that this is a very small percentage of the votes actually going into the system. Now, in terms of voting districts completed, now this might be important in a moment, and I'll explain why, but they say 218 voting districts have now been completed. That's 0.95% of the voting districts. Now, you might remember earlier in the evening we spoke to the CSIR, and they suggested they'll be able to make some kind of a prediction of just 5% of the vote. So in some ways, we're almost a quarter of the way or 1/5 of the way down that road to the first predictions of the this election. So that's where we are at the moment. The main figures you want to know, with just that small portion of the votes being counted, the ANC on 65.56%, the DA on 18.32%, and the EFF on 7%, the Freedom Front Plus on 4.8%, the UDM on 1.11%. So those are the results at the moment. This picture's obviously going to change very much indeed. And I'm going to sit down now, and we are going to continue our conversations with some of the guests we have here. In fact, we have two people. They're from separate parties, but their desks are right next to each other, and they seem to have quite a friendly relationship. We're going to find out a bit more about this. And I'm talking about the African Security Congress, a party formed, as I understand it, to particularly represent security guards, and the African Transformation Movement. Tebogo Saidi is the Deputy President of the African Security Congress, and Sizwe Richard is the National Communications Manager of the ATM. Gentlemen, thank you very much indeed for coming in. Good evening.
Good evening.
Good morning, I should say. Excuse me. All right. You were talking off air, and I suggested that the two of you seem to get on very well. Tebogo, I'm going to start with you. You actually have an electoral agreement between the two of you, right?
Yes, we do. It's actually not even an electoral agreement. You know, we decided that because we're not going to contest provinces, our voters did not know actually who to vote for. And ATM seemed like, you know, an obvious choice because of most of the relationships that we have with most of the leaders, and mostly a personal relationship with some of them. And we decided that, you know, common sense dictated to us that instead of throwing our votes away and allowing our voters just to dwell around and not know who to vote for, let's rather channel them to at least vote ATM on the provincial level. And that will also mean that at least we are able to assist them to boost their votes on the provincial level and still be able to maintain our votes nationally.
Well, it's this way. I mean, your movement's really, it's formed by churches, right? Messianic churches. I mean, I realize that there might be a lot of overlap. Many security guards will be people of faith, but is there that much overlap? I mean, you're bringing in things that are often religion-based. Security guards, it's a profession, it's a job.
Yes, it is a job. And it's not only ASC that have partnered with us. AFR also partnered with us. ACU also partnered with us, and many other parties that did not make it to the national ballot paper and also the provincial ballot paper. So yes, we are very optimistic of these elections results, and we believe that the ATM is going to do very well.
Why are so many parties joining you? Is it because you're well funded?
Not that. Mostly it's because they believe in our philosophy and our ideology. And secondly, they agree with our policy positions and our manifesto. So yes, they are voting on those grounds, and they are agreeing with us, and they are partnering with us on those grounds.
Tebogo, I mean, surely for your voters it would make more sense just to merge. I mean, I realize I think you need 100,000 rand to contest the national elections. I think you need over another 100,000 to contest each province. I get that. I understand the problems you have when you start. But if you have an agreement on such a level, why not just merge? Unless there's something else at play, gentlemen?
No. There's absolutely nothing at play. We are a sectoral organization, and really we wanted to actually give our voters and our members the best of what we can offer. And merging with another organization was just going to cause more confusion towards what our ideology stands for. And it will, you know, as much as we agree on many things, but we need to retain our identity so that our members and our voters at large understand exactly what we are fighting for. Because our fight and theirs, as much as we agree, are two different things. You know, as I'm saying that we are a sectoral organization and we are fighting things on a sectoral level. As you said in the beginning, you know, it's a job for us. And we need to maintain a certain dignity of life. And in order to do that, we then need to channel our focus directly to this particular sector.
So I know that you're the head of strategy for your organization, who I think more people know his name than they know the name of your leader. And I'm talking, of course, about Mzwanele Mani. He said that you're going to be the party in power in national government after this election. Voting is finished. Do you still hold to that?
Yes, and I still agree with him. And I'm still confident that his words will come to life. We've seen on social media how our members have voted in numbers, and how they believe that we will be the next government in South Africa.
If you weren't a Christian party, I'd ask you to put some money on it. All right. Sizwe Richard, National Communications Manager of the African Transformation Movement, Tebogo Saidi, Deputy President of the African Security Congress. Next time I speak to you, you might be one party? Yes, no? We'll see.
We'll see.
Well, your desks are next to each other, so there's plenty of time left here to negotiate. Gentlemen, thank you both very much indeed. All right. So those two people, and the reason I make the comment about that is because, of course, they have this electoral agreement around the provinces. Let's have a look at some of the results and what we have. And I'm just going to hit the refresh button. I'm sure you've hit the refresh button on websites before. And for me, that's exactly how it works. We're just going to look and see what we have here. Now, what we're able to see is that there hasn't been a huge amount of movement since we were last able to have a look at this. But what you can see is that we're still under 1% of the actual voting stations have reported. Now, that would be different to the actual numbers, if you see what I mean. And we'll be able to look at that. Now, what we are seeing is that the ANC, for the moment, is still very much in the lead. I must just warn you that as numbers come in, things can change dramatically. You can have voting stations in one big metro coming through, and that can actually make a huge difference just because of the numbers. So what we'll do is we'll keep a very close eye on the situation. You'll have live updates here throughout the night. And of course, what we'll do is bring you the latest here. We'll bring you the latest analysis on this as well. So just the numbers that we have: the ANC on 62.56%, the Democratic Alliance 18.32% of the votes cast and counted, the EFF 7%, the Freedom Front Plus 4.8%, and I'm sure that figure is going to change, and we'll go through the numbers as we go there. I'm joined now by our two analysts once again, Professor Mcebisi Ntletyana from the University of Johannesburg, and of course you know Angelo Fick, the political analyst from the Oil Socio-Economic Institute, very well indeed. All right, so far we've got just a few results coming in. Angelo, too soon to say if there are any shocks?
Too soon to say, but it's interesting to see who got single votes in provinces in those places, because those are clearly minority voters who are dedicated to their parties, and even in that space where there were 24 voters in Mount Aleph, you know, there were people voting for parties that you wouldn't have thought would be present there.
And Professor, to you, I mean, you know, as these numbers start to come in, you've got to be very aware of the sort of laws of numbers, that because it's such a small proportion, you could have a DA stronghold reporting, changes the numbers for a few hours, and then you'll have a few ANC strongholds reporting, and it changes the numbers again.
Well, the first one was quite interesting because the EFF picked about 8 votes in Mount Aleph, which is a rural area. And so far it hasn't been associated with rural folks, so it's a good indication, but we can't read too much into it. But it was noteworthy nonetheless, yeah.
All right, I do want to talk a little bit about the integrity of the electoral system, because there was quite a strong pushback from the Electoral Commission. So through the day we've had various comments and claims about people being able to vote twice and this kind of thing. We know this is a very highly contested election. Temperature's a little high, not worryingly high, but a little high. Angela, what did you make of the sort of response from the Electoral Commission? Quite sort of a strong language, I thought, a robust response to what's being claimed.
Well, I think it was a reminder to us that there are systems and checks in place, and that party officials are present in many of the voting stations. And if people are reporting these sorts of things and party officials are saying these sorts of things are happening, the question was, did these party officials raise these as concerns? Because if they did, then those would be under investigation by the IEC in those sites. And secondly, I think people need to start avoiding hyperbole of saying things like at many or in most, because for 22,000 voting stations around the country, if this happened to 10 stations, these are not representative. I hate to invoke Steve Biko in this moment, but the exception does not disprove the rule, to quote him. That is why it is the exception and not the rule. And statistically, 10 out of 22,000 is not. You know, those are exceptions, and exceptions will happen. They will have to be investigated, and they will have to be dealt with. And so I take the IEC's reminder to us seriously that we should not take things that are happening as being more significant or symbolic than they are.
Professor Ntletyana, you were with me when I spoke to Jessie Duarte, the Deputy Secretary General of the ANC. She suggested that turnout, the ANC, I mean, we know this, the DA has one too, has quite a sophisticated, quite a large get-out-the-vote operation. It's about encouraging people to get to ballot boxes, helping them when necessary. Political parties around the world do this. She seemed to say, and I don't know if it was sort of just post-election result or pre-election result spin or real, it must be real, I suppose, that, you know, their operation had gone better than they had thought it would. I mean, that would suggest a higher turnout in this election.
It was better turnout than the local government elections. Normally she's an honest person. She wouldn't admit up front, but she would say, well, there were challenges, right? But now she was quite upbeat, which would possibly mean then ANC making it, you know, in the 50s even better. Because earlier there had been predictions that turnout was extremely low. But she counted Tembisa, Alex, Soweto, that we did quite well. Maybe there's some truth in it. And if it is truthful, then we're looking at a formidable ANC performance, I guess. Well, not so formidable, but in the upper 50s, maybe.
Well, I mean, there are lots of numbers still to come. All right, are there specific areas that you're looking at? I mean, are there specific areas that you think to yourself, this is where the result is going to be interesting? So, for example, we've seen the IFP did quite well in the 2016 local government elections, defying perhaps expectations, although related to the sort of slight demise of the National Freedom Party. Are there parts of KwaZulu-Natal, or are there any particular provinces that you think this is where interesting data could come from as a result of this election?
So because KwaZulu-Natal is the space in which we've had political violence on and off for the last, decade, if not more, it'll be interesting to see what happens with turnout in that space, because that's, I think, going to be an important indication about whether the intra-party unity of the African National Congress held through this election. Because the people disaffected with the way in which factional politics worked itself out in that particular province and didn't turn out, or were prevented from turning out, or intimidated into not turning out, that might affect the ANC's performance. But, however, if the unity question was settled and the numbers look fine in terms of registration, then we're looking at a very different set of outcomes. And so KwaZulu-Natal is one space to watch. Gauteng obviously is another. But it'll also be interesting for me to watch places like the Free State and the Northwest Province to see where there were leadership challenges through the PEC and the leadership issues, whether the party could unify and bring people out, and whether the opposition parties, whether there's a shift there between the ANC and between the EFF and the DA.
Angelo Fick, Professor Mcebisi Tladiana, thanks very much indeed for sticking with me through the night. I really do appreciate it. There'll be more, of course, coming through all night here on SABC News. More on sabcnews.com on the website as well. There'll be more on all of the SABC radio stations tomorrow morning. So do stay tuned. More information coming through, more analysis of the results coming through, comprehensive packages on it for you tomorrow on all of our channels. Stay with us, and we're going back to Johannesburg and Tsepiso and Griselda.
In a UN report, scientists say climate change is getting worse.
1/3 of our food sources for the population come out of the ocean.
We spoke to people who have been directly affected.
We have lost a lot of cattle, Gemsbok vlakte, Tosca gebied and Jakkalskop.